What is the Eastern Orthodox view of atonement? What is the Eastern Orthodox view of atonement, sin, and what is the Eastern Orthodox view of atonement and sin versus
No,
I accept Florence. Yes,
it's recorded now.
It's recorded. No, they're gonna clip it. No.
Yeah, you're being clipped right now.
Oh, no, Father. Honestly, if
When
I ever do,
I brought Chris here just to clip you. You're done.
You know, I've been watching Chris's posts, right? Chris is funny. Chris, genuinely, I've been watching your posts. Your posts are funny. You crack me up, man. Keep going.
Yeah, Chris, no, I've been speaking with Chris. We spoke a bit on X, and then we spoke on Discord. And I invite him to VC and stuff. He's a pretty funny person.
He's great,
I really like him. But he can attest to me scolding him as well. I'm scolding everyone. Yeah.
You scold me the most. You literally just messaged me like, Jerome, why did you allow that person to be in the server for so long? Jerome.
Because I love you the most. That's why.
No. Aww, you're cute. You're so cute.
Jerome, didn't I basically do an interrogation on you?
Yeah.
Like for months?
You were like, who's your spiritual father? Who's your bishop? Who's the priest that you're actively under? Blah, blah, blah. I said, flip sake.
Interrogation. I'm glad that you were humble enough to accept this and not dismiss it, because you have every right to dismiss it and say, I don't even know if you're an actual clergy. Why are you doing this to me?
Yeah. But no, I gave it to you. I was just like, look, I'll just give you my bishop. I'll give you my spiritual father. To be fair, my spiritual father is all the way in Essex. He's in the monastery. So I go up to see him. He knows about the videos and everything. He just says, hey, please make sure that when you make your videos, you're not making us look like poo. And I'm like, okay, Father, well, I'm probably going to make everyone look like poo. He's like, yeah, that's the point. Well, so you have to try. I said, okay.
Can I say something now? Okay.
Yeah, go on.
I literally just got the DM. I'm not going to say who sent it, obviously. But I got a question. Okay. And these are the type of questions people don't know how to answer, but I am responsible to answer. Father, should we joke or be friends with those who blaspheme?
Oof.
Now, the canonical thing to say, right, is obviously not.
No.
You should smack his mouth to the point of breaking his jaw. Never talk to him again. Is that the pastoral thing, though?
No, that's legal.
Yeah, that's the legalistic view. And now I need to discern what to say to that person. Imagine if he asked that online in public.
Yeah, that's dark.
World War III.
Yeah, no, it's dark.
That's why he didn't go in public and ask, and came to clergy.
Which is respectful. And the thing, here's the thing: like, we know the remit of the Orthodox Church is as follows: if someone blasphemes, there's a very specific definition of blasphemy that we have, which is literally blasphemy. Literally means to say something is either true about God, which it's not, or to say something is false about God, which is not false. Right? So, like, if you attribute something to God that actually isn't to God, so you say God is a liar, that's blasphemy. You see, or Christ saying, "I claim to be God." Everyone said, "Oh, that's blasphemy." Why? Because a man can't be God. Right? That's what the Jews believe. So blasphemy is in that sense. Now there are other people that extend blasphemy to a wider like category. Like some people say, if you offend anything in God's creation, that's blasphemy. And everyone's like, well, I don't know. You know, like if I litter on the floor, is that blasphemy? You know, like if I litter on the floor, is that blasphemy? Well, no, obviously not. So there is a technical idea of blasphemy, which is basically to attribute something to God that's just not true. And there are forms of the atonement that can be blasphemous. To attribute anger to God is blasphemous when it's not like qualified properly. That is blasphemy because there's no anger in God. You know.
Yeah, we use anthropomorphisms
all the
a
time,
lot, especially in the Old Testament, right?
Postelene blasphemias stai Ellinica. No, stai Anglica.
Blaspheme, yeah.
Blasphemy, right?
Yeah. It's
So
a Greek word.
it is literally, but it's specifically when you vilify something. You know, like when you rile or you slander something. It's when you do something impious or reproachful to God's majesty specifically.
Isn't every sin basically blasphemy?
Yeah, literally every sin is blasphemy. And that would mean every subrogatory action is blasphemy. Like if you smoke, that's blasphemy because it's disordering the creation of God in your soul or whatever. So I don't know. But Nikolai Korea, I have no problem with you. I know you're very, very hardline. But if you do want to come up and publicly talk to me, please do. Okay, like
I'm already up here, by the way.
Hey, sorry, I can't see it. By the way, sorry. Nico, how have you been?
It's a space issue. For some reason, space is like 90% of the time doesn't even show when somebody pops up. It's weird.
So buggy. It's so buggy.
That's disgusting.
For example, Jerome mutes himself all the time based on the space thing. Whatever.
I don't have any personal issues with 90% of the people I speak with, by the way. But I just I tend to be a blunt person. That's just
Miko
how
might join as well. He texted me on Discord. He might join
great.
as well.
Well, obviously Nikolai, like, you know, we've had a private conversation. I won't get into it too much. But yeah, I think if you want to talk to me about the atonement, sort of what my views are, like, because I come from an academic background, so I don't come from a pastoral background. Father Dorotheo does. I don't know what background you come from. Maybe a military, social background.
Well, kind of a mix. I mean, I am former military, U.S. Air Force, mostly in the IT sphere.
Yeah. So, thank you for your service.
You don't have to thank me.
Is that the correct response? No, I've never worked in the army.
No, I really have. Maybe it's just my personal thing, but I hate it when people are, oh, thank you for your service. Like, dude, I got paid to do this, and I sat on, you know, it's like,
yeah, you sat on a desk, bro. You didn't do nothing, bro.
No, I mean, I was the kind of IT guy that had to like crawl through ducts and like pull cable and set up like field networks and stuff like that. So I was out on the field, but I wasn't being like airdropped into like enemy. You know what I mean?
No, that's fine. No, it's interesting though. So I come from an academic background. Never picked up a rifle in my life.
I grew up rural Minnesota, so I don't know if you're familiar with that, but rural Minnesota, like having like 6 guns isn't unusual, and you know what I mean. So it's
6. Yeah, it's fine. 6 is crazy.
6. Well, my grandfather is a gunsmith, and so he's very poor. So his way of like giving to the family is just to like throughout the year with spare parts, just build some guns and just give it to us. Like that.
Gangs and guns, boy, gangs and guns.
Yeah. And so, but no, I mean, yeah, I grew up very rural. Went to college for history. Realized you can't really get a job with a history degree unless you want to teach high school, and I had no desire to teach high schoolers. So I
Oh,
was like,
fair enough.
well, that's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Got married,
yeah.
then joined the Air Force. So I joined the Air Force out of necessity to, feed a wife and kid, so.
Oh, you've done well, man. You've done well. Thank you. Yeah, obviously my background basically just been in school. Literally went to uni. I think I went to Uni of Oxford, got my degree in theology. In the middle of getting my PGCE in education, and I'm getting my master's degree. So
Nice.
basically, pure academic background.
Yeah.
That's basically where I
I
come
was
from.
I was a history nerd, and
Hey,
I was given bad advice saying, "Hey, it's really smart for you to go." And I did do some theological studies as like a
yeah.
minor for when
Hmm.
I was reformed. So I was
Oh
in a
wow.
reformed background. So I come from like kind of
Yeah.
Calvinist, free evangelical,
Like
non-denom.
neo-reformed or classical reformed?
Closer to the classic. I mean, well, it really depends on who you say. The main
The John MacArthur
influences,
types.
yeah, the main influences that I would have would have been like R.C. Sproul, John MacArthur,
Okay,
Paul
so
Washer, John Piper, those
okay,
types of people. If you're
so
familiar with them,
neo-Protestant.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Paul Washer, obviously, R.C. Sproul before he died. John MacArthur, I think, still going strong. No, I think he's dead now,
No,
isn't
he's
he?
dead.
John
Yeah, he
MacArthur.
died
Yeah, yeah, he
last
died
year. I think.
recently.
I think it was last
Yeah,
year.
yeah, yeah. Because
So,
I saw the tweet, everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, memory eternal." I'm like, "Well, he doesn't really believe in eternal memory, so how can you say that?" But anyways,
well, he's a
yeah,
well he he was an out and out historian. So I mean,
yeah, he was dark. But
yeah.
this is what I'm saying. Like, and so you understand how, like, obviously everyone has different issues with this. You know what I'm saying? Like, to get into the whole PSA stuff, I've seen obviously the content online. Everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, PSA bad, PSA bad," and then I've seen people say PSA good, PSA good. Um, I've talked with Father Dorofio. I have multiple clerics
Well,
in
I
my
think,
server as well, and
yeah, I think the biggest problem, and I mean, I don't know what your view on PSA is. And I've
okay,
never really even criticized your view specifically because I don't know your view.
yeah, that's all right.
My only criticism was my main criticism with
Yeah.
someone like Miko or Orthodox
Mm-hmm.
Ensign and
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature is
Mm-hmm.
the way in which they're engaging with these dialogues and debates.
Okay.
Strictly speaking, I mean, if Ensign's going to go around and basically say anybody who disagrees with my very narrow interpretation of PSA is a gospelist heretic and is
Mm-hmm.
bound for hellfire, and he
Mm-hmm.
does this to clergy, priests,
Mm-hmm.
laity, basically anathematizes 90% of the church, anyone who disagrees with them. I have a major issue with that, right? I'm gonna be like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
listen, if you're gonna go around and make these very tall order claims, I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
I have every right to ask you
Mm-hmm.
who is the person backing you on these things, right? Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's reasonable in that. Now, for someone like yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say that like I have like Jerome, you got to tell me who your spiritual father is in order to speak
Mm-hmm.
about this issue because I think that
Mm-hmm.
you haven't reached a level of, let's say, combativeness and public uh, uh, um, um, publicity in a certain way that would demand somebody do that. Now, I don't think it's a bad thing to do. I think everyone should, especially if you're going to be in the online sphere. I think it's generally wise to be able to hold
Mm-hmm.
people accountable, right? But
I think that, yeah.
yeah. So, but that being said, I'm not like super hardcore on it. I just think that there are certain
Okay.
individuals that it's like, hey, you like we were tolerating it. We went back and forth for a few years now. At this
Mm-hmm.
point, it's gonna be like, okay, dude, who is your spiritual father? Because it doesn't matter how many quotes we address, how many times we say, well, that doesn't actually pick out PSA, or that's not actual PSA, or I fully agree with it. I just think you're misinterpreting it, or whatever the argument is, right? It doesn't matter what
Mm-hmm.
what quote they're using or who they're using, etc., etc. The real
Mm-hmm.
question at hand here is, okay, fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm gonna do this and it's gonna be it's basically I don't know if you've experienced this, I'm sure, because you've debated Protestants. It's like with a
Mm-hmm.
Protestant, you go to one verse, you answer that verse, and then they just retreat to the next one, like needgod.net style, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, what about this one? Well, let's go back to Romans. It's like, well, we already
Mm-hmm.
talked about that. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes a vicious circle, and nothing ever happens because it's just like, well, let me just copy and paste a bunch of quotes, and then we get nowhere because you know,
Everyone does the copy paste, but I think
well,
what
to a
happens
degree,
is
yeah.
if I look at like Miko or someone like that, like I've looked at Miko's content for a long time. He's in the server, for example, and just to be very very clear, Nikolai, as well. Um, Obviously, if you're a mod in a Discord server, it doesn't mean like you approve of that person's theology. literally, I can't run the Discord server because I'm busy in real life with stuff. And so I gave some people who know how to do bot creation and make sure the server's like tidy, like literally like tidy with channels and everything.
Yeah.
So Miko was there to just help with channel tidying up. That's pretty much it. Because I know that he can do it, so I just gave it to
Well,
him.
that's
But
fine, and
that's pretty much it.
I don't like. I'm not questioning
No,
your
I'm not saying you are.
decisions.
It's
I know
more so
some
just
people have
to
mentioned it, by the way, so I get why you're
yeah,
saying it. I get that, but
But I don't understand why. This is from my perspective. Obviously, I'm not really involved with everyone else's fields or stuff. But people generally take if someone's a mod in your server, that must mean you endorse him or he has authority.
well,
The people that have spiritual oversight are the priests there, the clerics that are there, multiple of them. I think there's like 8 or 9 of them in there. And they are there. Now, those clerics aren't, quote, Latinizers, and half of this, like, the 800 people that are there aren't Latinizers. Not all of them are Latinizers, if we take these strict views, and we shouldn't use the term Latinizers, it's just, like, not a true term. Or diorite, like, we shouldn't, and the word diorite is banned in my server, because it's just not accurate or fair to portray Orthodox Christians as a follower of a random comedian online. Now, that said, though, anyone's welcome in my server. If you're interested in Orthodox Christianity, you're interested in discussing the faith, come through. That's my whole thing. That said, when it comes to like any other sort of content and people post things, I've sat with Miko and I've seen him read a text, multiple texts in full, for hours. You know, I've seen him go to the Russian cathedral and learn Russian from the priests there. You know, and I've seen other people in the space, like Nectaris, for example, go and learn Greek, go to Mount Athos for a month to just learn Greek, just to be around the monastic community and live there, you know? So those people have actually practically tried their best to work there. Despite that, they've also done sins, right? Despite that, they've done very, very big sins that I've disapproved of publicly. And I've even told you that privately, as you know, as well. I've gone to Miko saying, hey, don't do this or don't do that, whatever. But I still treat them with love and deference. Why? Because they're Orthodox Christians and, you know, they're okay people, and I leave them here. It's better than to just isolate them and cast them out or whatever of the quote e-space or whatever the
well,
case may be.
I think, well, I mean, yeah, I don't want to get bogged down in the
Yeah, don't worry. Don't worry. Don't worry about it. It's
like
just that's my view.
the meta of like
Yeah,
why
yeah,
should we
yeah.
cast out this person or should we cast out this person? I generally think that it's just unadvisable to cast out anyone necessarily.
I wouldn't cast you out, and I don't know if you agree with me or disagree with me, but I still wouldn't cast you out, even though, for example, like I don't know, like we've just had a recent spat where you know we've been a bit fierce with each other, you know. But I still wouldn't cast you out.
I think that's partially mostly due to the nature of text-based interactions, to be fair.
Yeah, and I don't. That's why, like, when I read text, I just read it as text. I don't try to import emotion into it. You know what I mean? But someone, for example, like Daniel Dorothea, or formerly known as Orthodox Mickey, Mickey really takes issue with that. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
And
he
so,
might, and that's for him to answer to.
yeah, no, I'm not attributing that on you, but I'm saying as an example, there are people that feel very, very passionate about this thing, and we have to accommodate to that. You know, it's
Sure.
our
Well,
responsibility to help people through that, because I would never want to attribute sin on a person, and I wouldn't want to entice, let's say, Mickey. If I know that this is getting a bit too much, I'm gonna pull away because I know that the next thing I'm gonna say is gonna set him off. He's not a Muslim, you know. Like with Cora, when I won, that's fine. Like Cora is a Muslim. That's whatever. That's free game, you know. But as soon as someone is worthy of the chalice, okay, now I have to change the way that I act, you know.
sure. So, I mean, here, like, so I had a discussion, maybe it was a month ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, but about a
Yeah.
month ago, with a bunch of the guys that would probably be put into that category of groups that that push
Okay.
like penal substitutionary atonement and these other issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of these guys had been on record calling me a Pelagian, right? He's a Pelagian, or he's a semi-Pelagian, which again doesn't really exist. No one ever defines it meaningfully. And so I asked them like, okay, what have I expressed that's Pelagian, right? They couldn't answer.
Yeah.
And then they just said, well, you believe in universalism. No, I don't. Never have, never expressed that, right? So I think that the biggest problem here is that the definitions are important because there is a historic and meaningful reality to these terminology, right? These things don't exist in a vacuum, and I think you would agree with that.
No,
And
they don't.
so when we're assessing these terms, I don't care if someone's like for example, I know people that say I want to reclaim the rainbow, let's say, like we're going to reclaim the rainbow, but it's like, well, okay, sure,
Yeah.
and I'm not
Mhm.
necessarily against that, but at the same time,
It's
there's
just long.
specific
Connotations.
connotations, thank you,
Sorry.
that are attached to these things now, and we have to be careful because what ends up happening is a lot of
Yeah.
people import meanings that aren't there, and especially in the West, because there's a very
Mhm.
unique way in which the West developed theologically, and no one can really deny that, right?
Yeah, there are many Western theologians that developed. I think though, so number one, I'm really interested in semi-Pelagianism specifically because a lot of people go around, especially in the academic world, recently. This is a more recent thing to say, well, to what extent is there really semi-Pelagianism? You know what I mean? Now, Pelagius is very, very clear in what he believes that God's there, but like we sort of need a bit more gusto on our end. Now, semi-Pelagianism generally in the academic world is defined through Orange 529. That's where, for the first time, people sort of recapitulate the difference between Pelagius and then other people that believe Pelagius. Essentially, if you disagree with any of the canons of 529 that St. Caesarius set, semi-Pelagianism, right? Now, I know for a fact you don't disagree with any of them because if you look at Canon 29, if you look at Canon 25 and the conclusion, you agree with that, right? According to the Catholic faith, we also believe that after grace has been received from baptism, all baptized persons have the ability and responsibility, if they desire to labor faithfully, to perform with the aid and cooperation of Christ what is of essential importance in regard to the salvation of their soul. Right? So that's everyone believes that. Okay. Now, I think where people talk about semi Pelagianism is denying a lot of these kinds of things here. You sort of take this aspect of man has to choose God first and then God's grace comes, you know? So they take this temporal aspect of soteriology, and that's wrong. Like that is wrong because when we turn salvation into a time thing, we've basically misunderstood how the Paschal mystery sort of works. Second, I don't know what they claimed about you is. So as much as I try to keep up with the Twitter, I focus more on like reading stuff and living. So I don't, as in when I say living, not living the Orthodox life. I'm not perfect. I'm specifically meaning literally like job, work, study, money. You know what I mean? So I don't see everything, and I've only been on Twitter since what, like May. So I
Yeah.
haven't seen everything.
Well,
So
no,
I
that's
haven't
fine. That's
gone
fine.
to.
I'm not even saying that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you have seen it.
So
Well, I'm just saying
I
my
understand.
my
I understand.
point, my broader point in bringing that up is simply to say
Yeah,
that these issues are clearly something that are serious enough to go around and accuse people of, serious accusations. These are
absolutely.
not minor things to accuse somebody of, right?
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah,
uh,
I agree with you. But I'll
and
say this.
so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go on. So um let's park that because we get it. You know what I mean? We get it. Now that said, here's what I would say in terms of my position on PSA and everything. I come from an academic background, so I know that the historical developments. Do you to what degree are you familiar with the historical developments of PSA and everything?
I'm fairly well read on it. I don't know every
Okay.
like dot and line of Luther, for example. I mean, there's a lot of works of
Nah,
Luther,
nah, nah,
or
nah.
Calvin is like ridiculously. Well, first he's
Big.
kind of boring, but
Yeah.
he's also very. He's a lawyer. I mean, he
Yeah.
is comes from a legal background, so he's very very long
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
winded
yeah.
and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
very lawyerly in the way he argues as well. Like he's
Mhm.
constantly like saying, "I know that this is the logical conclusion of my position, but I'm going
Why
to."
do you sound like Trump?
It's just whenever I'm mocking somebody, it's so easy.
No, I like that. No,
Whenever
I do. I like that. I
it's
like
like
that.
whenever
Yeah.
basically what he says is like whenever Calvin constantly does this, where he's like, I know that if we extrapolate out the logic of the logical entailments of my position, it leads to this,
Mhm.
but trust me, it doesn't. Well, just saying trust
Mhm.
me, it
Mhm.
doesn't explain why it doesn't lead to that. It's like you're not going to find any person in the
Yeah.
Reformed movement that says oh, if you believe in PSA as expressed by us, it's going to lead you to one of two conclusions, which is, Nestorian
Yeah.
or splitting the Trinity. And,
Mm-hmm.
no one's going to admit that, right? Like, you're not going to find us, like, there's nobody that's going to just, like, straight up admit that. So, except for John MacArthur. So,
Yeah, he don't even care about anything, bro. John MacArthur is all sorts. So when people talk about PSA, to be very, very clear, PSA is not like when I say Protestant, by Protestant we specifically mean the Reformed movement. It's not a thing there. So academically, it's not a word that exists in French or Latin or even German. It's a term that actually comes from the English-speaking world. And the English speaking world wanted to look at what some of the reformers and patristic writers believed and try to come up with a concept that explained some aspects of their soteriology. It's the same way that we looked at theosis. Now, you can find the word theosis, by the way, in the Greek tradition, right? You wouldn't find it in the Latin tradition because there's no Latin exact equivalent, but you'll have like sanctification or sanctificator, you know what I mean? Like you have words that explain that. And so, as often as modern academics do, they try to find a title and try to stick it on an aspect of theology that comes from the past. And if you look at encyclopedias for theology, like in St. Andrews University, Adam Johnson defines it very, very clearly as the fact that basically people want to talk about the reconciliation of God. And what they specifically think that that term means is that Jesus satisfies God's righteousness by suffering the penalty for sin in our place so that, and this is the crucial part, human beings can participate in his righteousness. Now, within that definition, there are wide views. So the definition itself isn't the problem. It's the wide views that result from that definition. So that is what academics think PSA is in Protestantism, in people like St. Athanasius, whom Adams quotes, Johnson quotes, in other fathers. That specific aspect of the atonement is like over here, right? There's another aspect of the atonement, which is the iconic model, which is the idea that Christ restores the image of God in us to its fullest degree and now gives us the ability to have that image as well. That's also orthodox, right? There's also theosis, obviously, which is orthodox. And then you have recapitulation, which is every single human action was bad, and Christ becomes human so that he can purify every single human action, so that when we do it as Orthodox Christians, it's good. So there are so many atonemental aspects there, and all of them are orthodox in that every single aspect explains a different thing that Christ is doing, right? The heresy usually comes from isolating one in a specific way. And the problem with the Reformed movement is they took PSA specifically, if you read Calvin, as you've read Calvin, for example, and they've said, because PSA is a thing, we don't have to do anything, right? The works are imputed onto us. So they added something else onto it and said, here you go. You see?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree partially with that. I just also think that again, it doesn't just include that. PSA also has baked into the cake. Again, and I understand the development of the term PSA is different than the actual concepts that are undergirding. I get that. But I think the main problem here is that it also requires limited atonement. It requires sola fide. These things are baked into the cake of PSA.
Okay.
There's no, I mean, you can't have PSA without limited atonement. You can't have PSA without imputed forensic imputation or imputed righteousness, however you want to call it. You can't
Well,
have
let's think
PSA
about that.
without sola fide.
Well, let's think about those three. So forensic atonement, sola fide, and imputed righteousness, right? Those are the sort of the three that you identified. Would you like to go with imputed righteousness first, and then we go through?
We can start with whatever
And
you
content.
think is necessary.
Okay, so imputed righteousness is the idea that God basically gives you the legal designation. He just legally designates you as righteous. And it does not speak on any ontic import. Basically, it doesn't matter whether you are actually righteous in reality or not. God just calls you that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need to necessarily explain it per se,
Oh,
but I
sorry.
think
Sorry,
I think
yeah.
what I would like to I think the heart of what I'm trying to get at is that when someone uses this term PSA,
I get what you mean.
It's loaded in with those concepts.
Yeah. So
you can't really get around using it. And if you want to use it in this generic sense, well, then you've just basically neutered the term to where it's meaningless, and thus a whole bunch of concepts can be smuggled in very easily by just about anybody, and everybody
well,
and their
no,
mother can smuggle in a concept.
Well, I don't think so, because remember that the PSA specifically itself is one thing over here. Forensic imputation could still be held to by a Protestant without PSA. So it's not that PSA needs this in order for PSA to work. Like the definition of PSA, or the concept of PSA, which is the punishment that human beings have, Christ does it in our place, and then that atones for us, or that's a way that he unites us to God. You don't need that to be forensically imputed. Like that's not something you need. Because you can also say, as an Orthodox Christian, hey, well, in order for us to actually access that atonement, that thing that unites us with God, we actually have to be righteous. So it has to be infused. And so because it's infused, then God is able to legally declare as such. That's the Seraphim Hamilton sort of approach to things. And I think that's probably what's going on there. It's just that even if you look at sola fide, or faith alone, um, faith alone is something that's interpreted as a result of a way of looking at PSA. And the way you look at PSA specifically is because Christ has taken on the punishment of sins in my stead, then that means there's nothing I have to do. But if he even laid that out as a syllogism, that doesn't follow. Because simply the fact that Christ has said, I've taken on the punishment of the sins of all of humanity, that does not mean that you actually have access to the work that I've just done. So there's another thing missing. The thing that they've plugged in to fill that hole is sola fide, but sola fide isn't necessary to plug in that hole. The Orthodox Church says, yes, Christ has actually, got all this work, the work of God, that we believe in him and stuff, but we actually have to access that work, and we access that in baptism and so on. So in my purview, or the academic purview, I would like to say, PSA is one thing over here, and what Protestants have done really is add on random things and then sold it to you. The
Yeah,
same way that you
I
have
actually disagree,
Miaphysites
because the academic Protestant sphere doesn't agree with you on this. They don't just say,
with
they added
academics.
a whole bunch of these things, and these are all just additions, and we can use this term, and just say, we reject all these like little additions. I just don't think that follows, because
Okay.
the academic Protestant sphere doesn't see those as separate. They don't think that it's unnecessary. Like they think all these things are necessary entailments for that. And also, like with respect about the on the academic side, the church is not really designing the way we address theology for the academics. It's not meant for that.
Okay.
It's meant for we're supposed to express these views and express these theological terminologies and systems for the average layperson who's not academically inclined. And in fact, the history of the church would have been that most people were not academically trained. They would have had to have been, these concepts would have been explained or taught in a way that was, you need to learn how to pick out the specific philosophical underpinnings of XYZ person's biases in order to
Okay.
be able to get to this like generic term that we call PSA.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you that the most of the early church wasn't necessarily academically trained. That's exactly why those that actually undertook the task of writing theology were, and that's exactly why the letters that they actually appealed to were academically infused. And that's actually the reason why, when we taught theology to people, we didn't teach them the atonement. We didn't teach them philosophy and the doctrine of God. We taught them morals, because it's much easier to follow. Now, when you have people like St. John of Damascus, he is academically trained. When we look at St. Athanasius, he is academically trained. When we look at John Chrysostom, he is academically trained. And he's writing to his contemporaries, mainly. He is writing in a pastoral context because he's a pastor. But primarily, when he's writing catechetically, he's not just speaking to people that are uneducated. He actually tells the people, hey, read the documents that I've given you before we start our next catechism. If we look at his commentary in the Gospel of John, he says, please read this before I start. And I need you to actually go away and do the homework. And once you've done the homework and you've learned the concepts, now you can come back and learn this. And that's exactly what we should require of everybody. People shouldn't just try to get their theology from a YouTube video. We should try to actually get our theology, properly speaking. Now, when we look at people, for example, that talk about penal substitutionary atonement, there are Protestants, for example, that think that the gospel, that Christ being God, also entails that because he's God, that Mary's not the mother of God, because they have this specific concept of God. Well, I can agree with the Protestant on Christ being God. I just don't have to agree with the concept that because he's God, this happens. So it's the same thing with PSA, and we can see that with like people like William Lane Craig, like actual academics that talk about this. When they talk about the atonement specifically, William Lane Craig has a specific aspect of PSA, and
He's
he
not even
talks
a
about it
Christian.
as a fission. I don't think he is. I'm just using it as a general term.
He's not even heterodox. He's not even like even the
Here, look.
the
This is
academic
the
Calvinists are gonna say William Lane Craig's an Apollinarian.
Yeah, but we're talking about neo-Protestants. We're not talking about the classical reformers, because we could cite Votius and Calvin and others, but we're not. We're talking about the pastoral context that the church has to deal with today. And the pastoral context the church has to deal with today is with famous theologians like Craig, who, when he talks about, and he says vicarious atonement, when he talks about the vicarious atonement, he thinks that there's a literal fissure in the Trinity. Like there was a split in the will of the Trinity. But you can notice that other neo-Protestant theologians don't agree with Craig on that and don't think that that's necessary. But Craig's view is very, very popular. And so a lot of neo-Protestants, when they come in, when they hear PSA, they think a particular wrong thing. Even though academically that's not what it actually is, they might think that. And so pastorally, a lot of priests may say, look, this is wrong. And so over time, if you just hear that all the time, that's what you may associate as PSA. But we are also aware that a lot of our priests are not academically trained, and they should be, which is why standardly the practice of the ecumenical patriarchate is to try and train people theologically, send them to Thessaloniki and whatever. Now, my point here is with the sort of substance of PSA as to like what we should do in these dialogues to actually help our pastors in their pastoral ministry. I know that a lot of priests would benefit from Protestants actually being academically inclined, Protestants actually being cognizant of their history, and people that come into the church being cognizant of what words actually mean, so that priests don't have to address misconceptions in a blanket way. A lot of the time, people can even watch my videos or Jay's videos and they hear a concept and they understand something and they come in to the church, and the priest has to spend basically 6 months to a year deconstructing everything that they've heard by saying no to everything. Even though the answer isn't no to everything, it's actually yes, but, no, but, yes, and, yes, and. And so they start by just saying no to everything so the person can learn humility and then they move on. So
I mean, that's true. I don't see how this is addressing the main contention, though, that
sure.
I mean,
So
we don't teach PSA in the Orthodox Church, and this effort to try and create a lowest common denominator of what it means by just saying, well, let's take these words,
but you
penal.
haven't
What does
shown
penal mean?
how
What does substitution mean? And what does atonement mean?
the
That's not
problem
how
is that
anybody analyzes
yeah.
PSA. No one defines
So
it that way.
I'll show you. Well, I've shown you the literal definition of PSA that's generally considered, right? So
No, you
when
gave
pr-
me
ne-
a definition of it, but there are
no,
plenty of
I
people that
gave you
have
the
different.
Encyclopedia of Theology, the
So
Protestant Encyclopedia for Theology.
what is an okay? So Encyclopedia of Theology is
hmm
kind of not super meaningful to me outside of where it's because what we have to look at
St.
is not
Andrew's University, a historic Protestant institution that is also classical. And not just that, it is actually used in the academic world widely so, and actually is the definition that's basically
okay.
used when we talk
Again,
about this.
what matters is not just hey this they use this in a paper. What matters is what they end up actually asserting and making the claims attached to it. So
I
I like
agree with you,
we so
but it's not. Yeah, go on. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
at the end of the day, from a pragmatic perspective, someone could say academically this is what they mean when in pragmatic circles that's not how that actually sparses out. Again, people redefine things all the time. Um, that doesn't
So,
really
do you
have
think?
much of
Okay,
a
so is the problem. So Nikolai, right? Would look you we need to look at, okay, what is the definition of PSA that the Protestant world pushes? So there are three aspects of the Protestant world. YouTubers, okay, um, your Billy Bobs on the ground, and academics. The way that it works is the academics get to defining the word, then the YouTubers take from the academics, and the Billy Bobs take from the YouTubers. That's generally how this kind of stuff works, right? And we see that all the time. You have your Ruslan KDs, the YouTubers. The YouTubers take from the doctors like Gavin Ortland, and that distills down to the Billy Bobs. Okay? Now, with that, we need to look at what did the Neo-Protestants actually say this is? And I'm not saying that this is just found in a paper or cited in a paper. I'm saying this is what everyone does in every paper when they define this. Literally everyone. You won't find another person that doesn't define PSA this way. Now, there are other assumptions that people have alongside PSA. You could believe in sola fide without believing in PSA. You could just believe in free grace, for example. You don't have to believe in PSA to believe in sola fide. Neither do you have to believe
No,
in
but
sola fide to believe in PSA. That's
that's
the
not
thing that we're talking
necessarily
about.
true. I'd name me one person who believes in PSA who's not
Mhm.
holding to penal substitutionary, who's not holding to sola fide. Now, if you're going to point out to someone like Eric Ybarra admits that he's influenced by his previous academic.
I haven't cited Eric, but again,
I'm
sola
I'm
fide
using it
means
as an
that.
example. I'm
Mhm.
not accusing you of using Eric. I'm just saying if someone were to use someone like Eric Ybarra
Yeah,
admits that he's getting his understanding of PSA from Protestant background. So he's still getting
that's
influence
genetic
from them.
though. So that's a genetic thing. We're saying
No,
whether or
that's
not
not a
this whole
genetic
conversation,
fallacy, dude.
this whole conversation is a Protestant conversation, the same way Christus Victor is. You won't find like an Orthodox Christian, for example, before the Anglophone term was created, saying we believe in Christus Victor, because it's not an Orthodox term. It's a Lutheran term that we just took because it fits with what we believe. Like Christ, for example, we believe in Christus Victor, right? We do.
We believe that certain aspects of it are true, not the entire presuppositions undergirding it.
Okay, so what aspects of Christus Victor do you think are not true?
I would have to read Luther's
Okay.
stuff on that, but
Okay. The whole point of Christus Victor.
I'm saying that Christus Victor in of itself doesn't necessarily mean we adopt every single thing. Again, someone can say, yeah, we believe generally in what Christus Victor says, but Christus Victor doesn't sit on its own. Like Christus Victor is not the entirety of Lutheran atonement theology.
No, neither is PSA. The entirement of PSA is specifically just one aspect. For Calvin, it's specifically his anthropological theses, and that moves forward. Now, again, um, when we have PSA, we're yet to establish that in order for you to believe in PSA, you need to believe in faith alone. But faith alone is just justification by faith. That the formal cause of your justification is just believing it happened, right? So you don't need to believe that. Right. Christ doing it in your place and that unites you with God does not mean that all you have to do is believe in that. That's one step that Protestants did take. So they looked at our church
We have an
fathers and
academic
they
right
did
here.
that.
Let me just read off an academic appraisal of PSA and what it means, and tell
Who?
me what you disagree with this, because I think, and he's Orthodox, so that I think that this will be this will at least
Okay.
get us to the
If
same. Yeah.
okay, look, because I tried my best to not do that. The only time we're doing this is if we're trying to say, okay, what did the Protestants mean by it, and do we agree? Right? That's basically how a lot of these conversations go. If we want to do the whole, what do Orthodox mean by it and do we agree? Then I would just cite like a
No,
bunch of
he's
Orthodox theologians.
defining the Protestant view of it. He's not saying this is what Orthodox believe about it yet.
Is he
He's just
defining
defining.
it as a Protestant or is he defining it as this is what Orthodox think the Protestants are saying?
It doesn't.
Sorry, just you understand my reason why I'm asking this, right?
So again,
Mhm.
he's saying this is the development of it. This is where it comes from, and this is what the entailments are of it, and the beliefs undergirding it. So he goes through.
Okay.
It's like 3 paragraphs.
Look, Nikolai, right? I'm happy for you to read it. I just will caveat by saying that it's important to know why the citation is existing. It's not an authority, as we know, right now, because the citation specifically is an Orthodox person's perspective on what this is. Like if I cited Metropolitan Callistos, for example, or even Reverend Father Stephen DeYoung,
This
right?
is
That's a
obfuscation.
particular perspective on this. It's not.
Yes, it
It's not.
is. Yes, it is.
I'm
You're
going to let you
obfuscating.
read the quote, Nikolai. How am
Okay,
I
well then,
obfuscating?
but dude, I think I've gone maybe 10 sentences out this entire conversation so far, since we started the PSA discussion, and you've gone on these long diatribes trying to uh, uh, you're trying to teach
Nikolai, we
rather
can
than
watch this back.
discuss.
I
Yes,
am discussing
I'm
with you. I
recording.
haven't teach you.
I have it recorded also, dude. like, listen, we're not going to play we can play this back. I don't want to play these meta games. I'm trying
Okay,
to
so then don't
read.
say meta then.
I'm trying to come to a common agreement on what it means, because I want to move past just let me try and teach you what the Protestants think about PSA. I was a Protestant. I
I'm
grew up in
sorry
these
you feel
circles.
like I'm trying to teach you. I'm not trying to teach you,
That's what you're
Nikolai.
doing. You're monologuing. So I'm trying to
No,
get
we're
to I'm
dialoguing.
trying. No, you're monologuing. Dialogue requires
What?
two people
Yeah,
actually
and
engaging
we've
with what
both
they're
been
saying.
speaking, Nikolai.
One
Okay.
sentence and then you going on for 5 minutes each time that we say it.
I've not
Oh,
just
Lord have
interrupted you
mercy.
randomly. I've allowed you to speak. I'm interrupting you now because you're doing meta. Could we please continue?
I'm trying to get past the meta. So now you're talking the meta of the meta.
My
So
goodness.
can we move on? Okay.
This is
So
what you're
here
doing.
it is.
Continue,
Oh, Lord
please.
have mercy, dude. You just like this. You're so immature. This is
Thank
exactly
you.
why we had problems before.
All right.
So
All right.
again, there is no. So this is from Dr. Perry Robinson. He says there is no broad sense. PSA as a term doesn't even get used till the late 18th to early 19th century by Protestant authors to pick out specific views. Up until then, they used satisfaction language with modifications to make it compatible with sola fide. There is a biblical and historical language that is utilized by different views. All language of debt, payment, satisfaction, etc., is compatible with different views in the same way that the surface grammar of justified by faith alone is compatible with multiple views. All one has to do to start with Anselm and work your way up to Aquinas. It isn't late scholasticism that the philosophical categories that make PSA and sola fide possible even begin to exist and have theological purchase in the West. Almost done here. So payment for sin can be conceived in a lot of different ways, and it was so historically. That is
You can
why
send this to me. So
I'll post it. I share post via.
Nikolai, are you sure he's a doctor?
Yes, Perry Robinson has a PhD.
Where did he get his PhD from?
We're not playing this game. Do you have a PhD?
No, but I wouldn't call
Got it.
myself a doctor.
So
I wouldn't call myself a doctor though, Nikolai. You called him doctor. Anyways, look, the point is,
So I
if
haven't
he's
finished
trying
my
to,
sentence yet.
all right,
So payment for sin can be conceived in a lot of different ways, right? Much the same is true for trying to justify the satisfaction model in the same way. The entire point of Anselm's satisfaction model was to have a theory of atonement that did not rely on scripture and special revelation at all. It's an apologetic to Jews and Muslims, which is why, when he put it forward, it scandalized Western theologians, since the constituents and the deposit of faith are not deductions of reason alone. Is that an accurate summation of where
there was a lot
PSA
of
developed from?
there was a lot of information there, and we need to probably break it down. But can you send me the whole quote so we can do that?
Let me see how
Okay,
to
so
send
look,
chat.
my summation's pretty clear that there are people that don't know what it is and they hate it for whatever reason, and they need to actually learn what it is so they can properly appraise it. There are those of us that have tried their best, but they've tried to fit themselves into a
Here,
particular academic dialogue, and people basically need to be able to actually substantiate what they're talking about, which a lot of people haven't. Like you said, you need to believe in sola fide in order to believe in PSA. You haven't demonstrated that, right?
Yeah, so does PSA grow out of satisfaction models? That's essentially the essence of what he said there. That PSA is an outgrowth of satisfaction models via Anselm and Aquinas.
Whether or not it grows out of satisfaction models isn't answering my question. To answer your question, though, yes, but
Okay.
that doesn't actually,
So that gets us
deal with
one
whether or
step.
not
That gets us one step forward, is what I'm saying.
it doesn't, because remember the end of the road is, PSA means you need sola fide.
Yes, we'll get there, because
What's the
satisfaction
next
has
step?
certain assumptions, right?
Okay, so what assumption do you think that satisfaction itself believes? Not the theologians that purport them. For example, you could have someone like St. Augustine, who is very anti Manichaean because he writes like 32 books against it, right? But Maximus doesn't. So he will attack his theology in a particular way, and Maximus will also attack his own theology in a particular way as well. That doesn't mean that they actually disagree majorly. It just means that they have two different ways or approaches to the one person of Christ. So if you're asking me, well, some people develop PSA in this way, or some people develop PSA in that way. That's the same way as people developing Trinitarianism in different ways. We don't discard the term, okay? And we don't discard the notion or the concept or the practice. It's like Arians saying the Father is God. We're not going to disagree with Arians just because they say the Father is God. We're going to disagree with them when they say the Son is not God, right? So we're not going to disagree with a Protestant when they say, by PSA, I mean this, if they actually mean this. We're going to disagree with a Protestant when they add things in that aren't orthodox. For example, sola fide. For example, sola scriptura. And even then, we don't disagree with the word sola fide. In prayer books, you have it. But again, we know that we have to be clear what we mean here. So to wrap this up, where do you get PSA equals, or rather arrow sola fide, right?
Where do we get I'm sorry, you're gonna have to be more specific about what you said there, because I must have missed it.
That's fine. Nico, you said that PSA means you have to believe in sola fide.
Yes.
Where did you get that from?
Well, because in order for someone to hold to the penal substitutionary atonement, there are certain assumptions that they have, right?
We get that. That's what you said.
So, okay, listen, dude, if you're gonna interrupt me every time I get one sentence out, I'm leaving. So this is your last chance. Are you gonna be older than 20 and allow me to actually finish my sentence, or am I gonna leave?
Well, I'm not gonna critique your behavior. Please continue.
Well, no, that's very clearly what you've been doing this entire time. You're interrupting me every 5 seconds, can't get a word in edgewise. I'm trying to get there. I'm starting with the start. Can't keep my line of my train of thought clear because every 5 seconds you're interrupting. So are you going to be mature and actually have a dialogue, or are you here to, again, lecture?
And I haven't lectured, but please continue.
No, that's false. People can rewatch this.
If we want to do more, we can do more, but please continue, okay?
Well, again, this is just this is just your way to dodge around the criticism, but okay, fine.
Okay.
So, again, I didn't just say sola fide. Sola fide is wrapped up with a whole host of other things that are necessary for PSA to flow from, okay? Now, what were the things that I listed? Do you remember?
PSA, imputation.
And
the final thing you said was
this is not it. It's not exhaustive. It's limited atonement. Okay.
You said sola fide, imputation, forensic stuff, and I was still speaking. You interrupted me, and the fourth one was what you just said. So I don't understand why we keep doing this. Do you want me to write it down? I mean, so that we don't forget, right? Limited atonements.
I'm trying not to get bogged down, because what you want to do is you want to break down each and everything into it's like, okay, so prove to me sola fide. Now I want you to prove to me limited. Now I want to no, these things are a holistic system. You can't have one without all the others supporting those things.
Sorry,
would you agree with that or not?
Well, no, because you can have different Protestants that believe kind of some things. So
what?
You don't need to believe in limits.
Well, then they don't believe the thing in question. If they abandon
so if they abandon,
structure,
you just interrupt. Okay, so look, Nikolai, if someone believes in PSA, like let's say Luther believed in PSA, right? Would you say he believed in limited atonement?
He believed
obviously not.
He believed in a form of limited atonement. Now, he didn't go to the degree that Calvin did.
The Lutherans that believe in PSA, right? Do they believe in limited atonement?
Lutherans don't believe in PSA. Name me a Lutheran theologian from the classical reformers that believed in PSA. They believed in vicarious atonement, vicarious satisfaction. So they
vicarious satisfaction is PSA.
No, it's not. See, this is why you're ignorant. You're ignorant of these. You're ignorant of these basic distinctions. Again, you could.
What's the difference between PSA?
I tried breaking this down, and you're too impatient to listen to.
Okay, I'm sitting here listening to.
Okay, if you take issue with the title Doctor, Perry Robinson again goes into detail about these. Oh, you just scoff about it. Are you going to actually debunk what he said? So again,
well, I don't know the thing that he said because you didn't post it, Nikolai.
I sent it. I sent it over.
Where? Did you send it in my DM?
No, I can't DM it to you. It won't let me. You must have closed DMs.
Look, this is okay. So
you can
send it to me on Discord.
You have my Discord. It should be linked in the comments below of the stream.
I can't see it here.
Let me try and pull this up here.
Anyways, Nikolai, look. If you, I'm not going to lie to you. So look, we're not talking about the academic world anymore. We're talking about a random researcher, right? Now, I think he has some formal training, which is fine, but I don't think he's part of the
Do
academic
you
world
have
per
any
se. I
formal
think he's a
training to be
researcher.
talking about this?
Yes.
Oh, really? So you have a PhD or a master's in the in the necessary fields on specifically Luther and their atonement theories. You've done a dissertation on the atonement theories of Protestants.
So again, when I say formal training, his BA was studying philosophy. So
So
it wasn't studying soteriology. My BA specifically was studying patristic salvation. It was theology and religion that I did at Oxford. But
hold on.
that's
That
neither
you
here nor
said
there.
patristic. That doesn't mean that you have a clear understanding of the Reformed understandings of these things. And
We did patristic stuff and reformed stuff. So we did
So
soteriology. So what we did is, I will tell you my papers. I did Athanasius, I did Augustine, I did Luther and Calvin, I did the early church from 37 to 328, no, 337, no, 53 to 337. I did Chalcedon, and I did the Byzantine to Baghdad paper. So that's all I did. I think there's more, but I forget. Anyways, look, did you send me the quote?
I'm trying to pull it up and send it. It's being a pain in
That's
the butt
fine.
to try and find it in my bookmarks. So hold on.
That's fine.
Hold on. I have to mute real quick because my wife's calling me. So
it's okay. Tend to the family. It's all good. I'm gonna bloviate the space now. Didn't mean to breathe out. But yeah, so this idea that like salvation's a package deal, I just don't necessarily agree. Or even the 39 articles. It's so hot. I don't even think that Luther specifically believes in limited atonement. Right. Okay. Okay. Then we can, for now we can dismiss it if you want and just move on to something else. Okay. No. We can with you, as in we can just talk about another thing. So I don't think just citing Perry would help, and I respect Perry a hell of a lot. By the way, I don't disrespect him. But I think he would probably call himself like a researcher on this topic, and I think he's read a lot. But one of the things, for example, that Perry would note is the fact that the harrowing of Hades isn't really as emphasized in Neo-Protestantism, which is absolutely true, you know. But that's because as a result of a focus. So I think that's focus. I don't think that's definition. Okay. All right. So I think that when it comes to the historical background of universal uh, salvation, we have like Methodists, for example, like John Wesley. The Wesleyan view is obviously uh, John Wesley obviously believed that universal atonement is true, that he died on behalf of all people, you know. And Lutherans, Reformed, for example, Robert Falconer, he has a paper specifically on what the Lutherans believe. Reformed hold to a limited or definite atonement view. Lutherans teach that Jesus' atonement is infinite in its saving value and unlimited in its extent. So unlimited in extent literally means it can apply to everyone. Now, whether it's efficacious only for the elect is different from whether it was specifically for the purpose of only the elect. So the difference with limited atonement is limited atonement, theologians like to say that actually it's not just in its effect, not just who actually accesses that, but actually who that access was purposed for. So that's what the Calvinists sort of believe, there was purpose for those that are elect. Whereas the Protestants generally agree, yeah, obviously salvation will only really be accessed by the elect, but it was meant for everyone regardless. And that's sort of similar to the Orthodox idea, like Christ did want to come and save everyone, but not everyone's going to get saved. Or justified, I guess. Someone else requested. The author chat. Hello. I mean, here we're talking about limited atonement, but yeah, but we there are theologians like Saint Gennadius Scholarius. You know, we have so many, but not gonna get into that. I mean, Father, if I not Father, Father, just let me know if we're going a bit too, you know. There's a lot of people here. I have to go soon because stream starts at 7. So, who sent me a message? Oh, it's my WhatsApp. Let's go. Emperor's laughing at me. Justin Foster. I don't know what that means. Hello, Justin.
Jerome, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's up?
So it seems to me the definition of PSA is super important, as you guys were trying to hammer out earlier.
Yes.
It seems to me that there's this modern, this more newer thing going on where Protestants or even some Catholics like Eric Ibarra will try to find any father, any quote mentioning anything that has to do with a penal, anything to do with a substitution, and anything to do with an atonement, and rebranding it as PSA. And I just don't quite understand that. And so when they talk about PSA, it doesn't actually have to do with the scholarly PSA that most are talking about. So there seems to be this disconnect between people who are talking about the scholarly view of it that originally came out of the Reformation, and a newer thing where they view PSA as a spectrum.
Yeah. So,
and I don't quite understand why the push to make it a spectrum, has to do with or where it's coming from.
So the provenance of PSA again is modern academics. So basically, modern academics use this term to talk about random Reformed and patristic theologians, right? Just we like to map theological history. We like to map where concepts come from, right? As academics. And then what happens as a result is you have YouTubers who think that academics like me, funny. We pick that up and we try to tell it to people because we think it's cool. And then people pick that up and run with it, right? Pastors, anyone, Billy Bobs. Now, the academic definition, like I tried to establish, is the thing that we should care about because that's actually what PSA means for these people, right? Before we get into what the YouTubers think and what the Protestants
by the way,
now on the
I'm
ground
back,
think.
by the way, so I just wanted to let you know.
I'll wrap this up with Justin and then we'll get back to okay. So this is a general definition that Protestants accept. I'll read it now and I'll actually post the quote here. This is literally Jesus as substitute or Jesus as penal substitute. Okay. It says, in short, penal. So it says, it will now turn to one of the most contested subfamilies of substitutionary theories, which is penal substitution. In short, penal substitution is a range of accounts of the atonement, qualifying the way that, as our substitute, Jesus satisfies the righteousness of God by suffering the penalty for sin in our place, that we might participate in his righteousness. Now, these views vary significantly in their accounts of divine wrath and a host of other nuances. At present, it suffices to point out that at one end of the spectrum is the fairly limited claim that Jesus in some way takes upon himself the penal consequences of our sin, which is death, while at the other end of the spectrum are far bolder claims that in some way or fashion the Father pours out his wrath on Jesus. This full spectrum, with all of its diversity, is a family of views known as penal substitution. So that's why I argue and advocate for what I advocate for.
You think that the spectrum view of PSA is the academic view.
Yes, and the reason why is I actually just read an academic to you. So that was the Encyclopedia of Theology from St. Andrews.
Is that how the reformers viewed it?
So the reformers are the people they're analyzing, right? So what they've done is they've looked at different reformers' views on it and they grouped them together and said this family of reformed views is this. Okay.
I think that's where the disconnect is coming from, because when some people bring up PSA, they want to strictly talk about what the reformers meant, whereas the modern, the academic view is more of a spectrum with it.
A spectrum of those reformers. So like a lot of people want to do this thing, and a lot of Orthodox do this thing where they want to say the church fathers use the same definitions all the time in every sense, right? So whenever a church father speaks in this way, every church father will speak in that same way, right? So we like to monothelize. Whereas what academia likes to do is say, well, every different person has their own different opinion. And so we'll talk about one view as a family of different people's opinions.
See what he's doing here, guys?
Same thing with the reformers.
He's doing the exact thing I did with me.
And said each reformer is going to be treated as a different theological mind in its own right. They all believe different things. And so they clustered them all together, said PSA, and then finished. Halas. So when someone says, I believe in PSA, like the academic just pointed out, we could say PSA is this very tame view, which most Orthodox should be fine with. But you could also say PSA is this really extreme thing, which is something that William Lane Craig would say.
I see. Yeah. All right. So I'll let you and Nikolai talk again. I just wanted to bring that up,
Yeah, it's fine. So just posted the quote in there so everyone can see it. This is the general idea that most academics mean by it. It's not just one idea. It is one idea that also has a cluster of different opinions of how people cash out that one idea. Sort of similar to views in the Trinity.
Do you think Christus Victor is a spectrum?
It can be, yeah.
If everything is a spectrum,
because
it's meaningless.
We believe in Christus Victor, for example, but we don't believe in every cluster. We don't believe in Christus Victor alone. We believe in theosis. But also, you could have multiple views on theosis. You could have theosis, which is Palamite, but you could also have theosis, which is Origenist, right? Origenistic theosis
Lutherans claim that too, right? So, for instance,
true.
Missouri and Wisconsin synods say you have to believe in PSA. Of Lutherans, but they also believe in other things. They'll say
other things as well.
You have to believe in PSA and Christus Victor.
Exactly.
What makes us different from them?
What makes us different is the way that we actually place the responsibility of the sacramental life in achieving those things. So, if the PSA is Christ did this thing, the church asks the question, so what do we do? The Protestant answer is we do nothing because Christ has already finished, right? But what the church says is, well, Christ's work is all the way over here. We have to access that somehow. How do we access the work of Christ, right? The Protestant answer to that is, I just believe that it happened. The Orthodox answer to that is,
sola fide.
We participate in the sacrament. So we participate
he just
in the
admitted it's sola fide, guys.
By baptism. And we start our sanctificatory process with the seal of the Holy Spirit.
Is the point where we are on the spectrum with PSA for the academic definition the same point where the Lutherans would be?
Some Lutherans, not all.
I see.
Some, because Lutherans again generally.
Did you catch that? He literally just admitted
where the disagreement would be.
sola fide.
Some Orthodox would say we're on a different place on the spectrum.
We are on a different place on the spectrum. We're not on the same place of the spectrum as every single Lutheran.
But you think some Lutherans are on the same as us?
Yeah, like you have some Lutherans that are gay, right? But being gay is wrong. So we talk about Protestants here, okay? Like it's not my fault. But the spectrum basically ranges from what I've just said. Okay, the spectrum ranges from Christ in some way takes upon himself the penal consequences of our sin, law of God broken, death. Christ takes on death. At the other end of the spectrum is anthropomorphically God dished out wrath in Jesus, and there's a fissure in the Trinity. So we're talking like our needgot.net.
So that's where you would say the difference of where the Calvinists are on PSA and Lutherans, for instance.
So
is the break in the Trinity.
So you have like some neo-Calvinists that will do that. Your R.C. Sproul's, your John MacArthur's that Nikolai is really familiar with. But then you have like your Votiuses and your Turretins and your Calvins that don't say that. But you can see that progression and development in theology, though, right? Like that's the problem with Protestantism. People can just like develop whatever they want.
And we criticize PSA. Mostly, we're talking about the Calvinist
these
view
neo.
of it, where it
You're
breaks
talking
the
about these
Trinity, right?
neo-Calvinist. Yeah, but that's a neo-Calvinist thing. That's why I don't disagree with when Father Tom Soroka or FSDY comes out and says PSA wrong. You know, and I don't make videos and stuff on that, and you know, I don't need to.
Doesn't
right?
the Westminster Confession say something like the Father damns the Son or something like this? Doesn't that have Trinity
we can
breaking
look at
language
the. I
in it?
mean, I'm sure we can look at the Westminster Confession. We have the Holy Scriptures. We have the saving life. We have the assurance of grace. But are we talking specifically on what exactly? Is it? There's a specific statement in there.
Do you believe that the classical Calvinists had a Trinity breaking view of PSA?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Right.
So those people like Votius, not necessarily. They could.
Interesting.
Like if they could if you like really push it. You know,
No,
like
because it requires
Calvin's
all their
view,
other
for
errors,
example,
dude.
of predestination. We usually take this idea that
So
God has permissive
again,
will,
Jerome
things that happen in
he's the only
reality,
person that
and
has
then
actually
his
studied enough
antecedent
to
will.
know
So
these
what he
things.
actually
He's the
wants
only
to
guy
happen.
that understands all of these
Now,
nuances.
God
It's
can
written
will
all
All right.
certain things.
I just thought I would bring that up. I'll let you talk to.
By the way, I want to be really, really clear, right? Like, I think you have to take from Calvin to do that. I think there are problems with Calvin, by the way. I do. And I think that there are problems with his ways of conceiving the divine energies. That's not a thing in his system. So I think that would be a fissure in the Trinity in that way.
Maybe this is a good place for you and Nikolai to talk about, because I would like to get his view on this, about the idea that PSA is a spectrum, that you believe that the classical Calvinists, some of them could not have a Trinity breaking view. Some do, if you, as you said, if you push it really hard.
It depends on the person. It's not a monolith. Depends on the person.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Nikolai, you there, brother?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
All right. Ready to continue?
Yeah. No. I mean, just to answer Justin, I think that again, the actual term PSA is relatively new in comparison to some of the concepts. So you're not going to see Calvin say, "I believe in PSA," but
right. I guess that was my point earlier.
Yeah, the reason R.C. Sproul, John MacArthur, and these people that studied Calvin probably more than both me, Jerome, and you combined, right? There's a reason they came away with a specific view of these things, and there's a reason why they're the people that they studied, for example, came away with those views. It's because it's the necessity around it. So the Reformed system, which is the one that developed PSA, the language of PSA, has these things built into it, and it's a necessary condition. Now, modern day Lutherans might say, well, we believe in PSA, we just literally remove all the things that makes PSA distinct from every other atonement view. So it's like, oh, so you just believe that if like I was explaining earlier, if you believe that PSA is just simply Christ took a penalty, he was a substitute for us, and it was an atonement. It's like, okay,
that's
sure,
fine, right?
But that doesn't pick out the specifics of the Reformed developments of it, and therefore, all you're doing is kicking the can down the road and causing catechesis problems for people that are be like, hey, do you Orthodox believe in PSA? And they're like, yeah, sure, I believe in PSA. And they'll be like, oh, great. And then there's all these assumptions that they're going to bring in with it. And now suddenly you have to do extra work in saying, well, not the way you understand PSA, when you could just use a
you could say
an orthodox language, which is not using PSA,
So
because PSA
what
is
exactly
a modern development. It's not a development
Right.
that happened within the Orthodox Church. So why use it? Why adopt the language?
And
really
Jerome
good-
was
really good
saying that too. So what exactly do you and Jerome disagree on?
So I'll tell
Well,
you what
we were kind of
Go on.
disagreeing on, real quick, Jerome. Just
good.
correct me if I'm wrong. By the way,
It's all right.
if we what we might disagree on, Justin, is I'm saying that there are certain necessary presuppositions and positions that they have to hold in order to make their view of PSA actually PSA. Otherwise, you're just removing all of the distinctives.
So basically, Justin, right? My view is sort of different from Nikolai's, right? My view is basically you got PSA as a sort of broad category, and then within that broad category, it's a spectrum of different views that people could sort of have, right? Nikolai's view is more so PSA is one specific thing, and this one specific thing has attachments to it that are concomitant to it, and that means, well, not concomitant, but necessarily flow from it. Right? Now, there are some people that concomitantly have views, but just because something's concomitant doesn't mean it's necessary. But that's sort of Nikolai's stance. So one of the things he said was limited atonement, sola fide, forensic justification, and imputation. Right? So those are some of the factors that he listed out. I was sort of saying, well, could you demonstrate that in order for you to believe this definition of PSA that sort of everyone's working with, we need that? And he's like, well, it's a whole system, right? Right. You can't interpret this in a vacuum. It's an entire system of beliefs that you have to take as a wholesale package. And that's where I was going to get into, well, is it though? And
yeah,
that's where we get
I do have a way to lay it out here that I think is a little bit more brief.
Okay.
But the first thing is, would you agree that in the Reform system, the system that developed this theology, at least let's just assume R.C. Sproul and these guys, right?
Sure.
Tell me if this is a accurate understanding. PSA is a completed, finished legal transaction that occurred on the cross. Christ paid the exact literal penalty for the sins of his people. Would you say that that's a fair enough definition?
That's a start. So, like, yes, that would be like a definition that people may utilize.
This is why.
But I'd also say,
go ahead.
Sorry. So
add anything you feel necessary.
So I would actually say that this is sort of proving that spectrum view, because you could look at sort of people like Saint Athanasius and they could sort of say the same thing. Now, the reason why we don't say Saint Athanasius is a heretic is because there's other things that he also believes that make his view fine. You know. Now, I'm happy if pastorally you just want to say, well, when I say PSA, I mean Sproullism, I mean John MacArthur, that's it, and I'm going to ignore the rest of the spectrum. Cool, but just don't deride anyone that acknowledges the rest of the spectrum and speaks in this sort of different way without, picking out other people. So I just say, to be very brief, yes, that is a sentence that sort of encapsulates the finished. Repeat that again. The saving finished work.
Completed, finished legal transaction that occurred on the cross. Christ paid the exact literal penalty for the sins of his people.
Yeah, that's a definition of PSA. Yeah, that's a definition.
Well, okay. Well, we'll get into that here in a second. Here's why PSA, I believe, necessitates sola fide. And if you just give me a paragraph, I can get that out, okay?
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to say something else.
Go ahead. Feel free.
No, actually, no, that's wrong. That's wrong on me. Please continue.
No, it's fine. If it helps clarify something, go ahead.
Yeah. I put in the chat another definition, and you notice with your definition, it's the sort of finished legal payment. But in my definition that I presented, it actually has this phrase, so that you can participate. You see how participation is actually neglected from your definition.
The Adam Johnson one, or is that the one?
Yeah, the Johnson one.
Okay, just want to make sure that there wasn't one I was missing.
No, that's fine. That's fair on you, actually. Also, as Nikolai is reading, please don't say Robinson's a horrible source. He's well researched. Let's respect the man. All right.
Well, I mean, I hear a lot of people say that, but then whenever he challenges their views, they kind of all just stop even responding or answering basic questions. So it's like, if you're going to say he's wrong, then you should be able to at least answer or be able to respond meaningfully to. I mean, he takes the time to write freaking essays to Twitter responses. Right?
To be fair, I do the same thing. I sent you like a wall of text, didn't I?
Well, yeah, sure, but but like, if you're going to go back and forth with Perry and you're going to say he's not respected, I mean, that's just not true.
He's respected. I mean, in the circles he dominates, of course he is.
So for others rather, but Jesus, this is spectrum. Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to nitpick that right now. I could nitpick
Yeah.
it, but I'm not going to. So yeah, I understand what you're saying there. So,
Yeah.
so
I disagree with the view you just said. So if that's all PSA is, yeah, of course.
okay. So, the reason that
It's
PSA necessitates sola fide is that if the debt is fully paid, which is what their view entails, that God cannot legally demand anything else from the sinner. He
right.
cannot demand good works, repentance, or obedience as a condition for salvation, right? So, because of that, it would be considered double jeopardy, and
Yeah.
therefore punishing Christ for the sin and then punishing the sinner again by demanding works. So,
Because there's nothing else he's done.
exactly. Therefore, salvation must be received through an instrument that is not a work, and that instrument is a purely passive faith alone. That's why PSA necessitates, at least from the Reformed system, necessitates sola fide. Does that make sense?
From Sproul. And so I actually understand your point correctly. Do you mind if I sort of recapitulate that, right? So you got it's the legal model, right? So you've gone in and you've said, okay, legally, Jesus Christ has done all this kind of stuff, right? And because of that, there is nothing that God can really punish you for, because he took all your punishment. Not just all your punishment, but actually all the things that would actually require punishment, right? And because of that specifically, God can't punish the sinner again. And because he can't punish the sinner again, then God has to reward him. There's only one thing left for him, not any works, but simply a passive faith that Christ has. That actually isn't necessarily PSA itself. That's actually a specific framework of legality, a pure legal framework. Of course, legality exists in the fathers, but I agree with you. That legal framework by itself, sans anything else, actually to the contradistinction of anything else, is wrong, because it's reductionist. You've reduced salvation to a merely legal model and then put PSA in light of that model. So my perspective on that, Nikolai, would be the problem isn't actually PSA itself, but actually how PSA works within the legal framework that you've actually presented by Sproul.
Okay. So, but the problem is that all of these other things are building up their understanding of PSA, and I don't think that it's just Sproul, by the way. I think if you actually read Calvin,
whose understanding of PSA?
Yeah, I think if you read Calvin very closely, which Sproul and all these other guys do read Calvin very closely, there's a reason they come away with that understanding of what Calvin is saying about PSA.
Yeah.
Now he may
So
not, again, he may not
take on.
use the word overtly.
No, it's fine. That's fine, obviously, and we agree that obviously,
So-
again, this is Sproul looking back into Calvin and other English authors looking back into Calvin and trying to evince that. But again, Nikolai, right? This is what I'm taking issue with. It isn't that is the issue. The issue is the legality framework. So the pure legal framework is the start point, and from that legal framework, they put PSA in.
PSA is a legal framework that is designed to defend these other necessary views of their these other views that they have.
So you think that the legal framework actually is a result of PSA rather than the other way around?
I think the legal framework that they have theologically is what led them to develop
this idea of PSA.
Well, I think PSA wholesale. Again, if you're just going to, and I'll say this again, I have said this before, if you're just going to reduce PSA to a very, very basic definition, I would just say, well, at that point, you're just not picking out the historic developed model of PSA, and you're just.
Do you think?
Go ahead.
1 second, Miko.
Well, do you think?
You don't want to interrupt. Just 1 second, Miko, please. So, here's what I'm going to say. Okay, I want to finish that thing off with Nikolai just quickly, and then I'm going to let Miko and Nikolai, I'll let you two talk and I'll moderate to make sure that Miko, you're not overstepping onto Nikolai, and Nikolai, you're not overstepping onto Miko, okay? We finally, to some degree, created a space where people can talk, and this is what we're supposed to do. So don't be misbehaving, guys. Let's act mature. Nikolai, just to respond to your thingy, if that's okay with you, I would say that when we look at PSA, given the spectrum view, and I can actually substantiate the spectrum view with the encyclopedias and so on, that these Protestants obviously do utilize, that people, all the Protestants, like Sproul, for example, would be aware of. I would say that the spectrum view would also place pretty much any patristic author on there. If you just simply read the Incarnatione section 9, you will see that he would fit on the spectrum on a more tame view. But you can see that his view of PSA, let's say, his particular view of PSA specifically is within a wider framework of incarnational theology. So that's why Athanasius is fine. The problem isn't actually the PSA itself. It's the framework that you put PSA in. And the framework that Calvin develops is a legal one because he specifically has a specific anthropological idea of merely God as a judge, and God has to satisfy particular laws that he has. And he doesn't talk about theosis in this way, right? So that reductionist idea is what leads to his view of PSA being a problem. And so when you have modern readers like Sproul, he just picks that up. But Sproul's problem isn't PSA itself. It's actually the framework that I take issue with because it's reductionist in nature. Everyone accepts a legal framework in orthodoxy, but it's an ontological one. It's not just like God arbitrates rules and put the rules there, right? These things actually are the way that the actual reality of things work. When God put the rule of don't eat the fruit, that's why we talk about it as consequences. Our language of sanction is ontic. When God is punishing, there is actually something happening in reality, which is someone's conditions getting worse, not just I offended God. And so removing that purely legal framework and actually putting the proper framework, the orthodox framework, which is incarnational, which is anthropological, and acknowledging the legal specific aspects of that framework, because God is a judge that comes to judge the living and the dead, we can see these other legal things also follow, but in a more healthy way. All right, that's all I'm going to say. Miko, Nikolai, I hope you do have a good discussion. I'll keep the space open. Miko, please, I'd ask for charity for Nikolai, and Nikolai, of course, I'd ask the same. Brothers, you guys can speak.
Yo, what's up, guys? I hope you're all well. May the Lord bless you all. What's being talked about right now?
Nikolai, you can go from there, Nikolai.
PSA and the necessity of sola fide, limited atonement, and forensic imputation to pick out specifically PSA.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I think you already know my position on those things. Believing in concepts such as the satisfaction of justice, the satisfaction of wrath, and imputation, it doesn't necessitate specifically Protestant views of sola fide. I just reject that assertion. The fathers clearly teach satisfaction. The fathers clearly teach propitiation of wrath. I mean, it's all there. I have loads of quotes on my computer. I can send all of these books your way.
I mean, that just ends up being an assertion of, well, I've read the church fathers, therefore I know that this is how it is, when we have other people that read those same church fathers and say, well, that's not what they're saying at all. These things have been...
Okay, and I can talk to those people.
Well, okay, so you've talked to them. I don't understand what like, you saying that essentially doesn't move the ball down the field at all. It doesn't actually say anything. It just says, hey, I think the church fathers say this. Okay. Well, I don't think the church fathers are mean. I don't think that the church fathers are saying it in the way that you understand it. Again, because PSA has a specific thing that it picks out, right?
What is that specific thing it picks out? Tell me. I'm prove it.
I was just talking about this with Jerome, sola fide, which I think he ended up agreeing, saying that if you take a strict understanding of the reformed understanding of PSA, now me and him might disagree with the spectrum analysis. I actually kind of disagree with his spectrum analysis, but we're not going to get into that right now. The question on the table is whether or not these things are necessary to actually build off of to make PSA even possible in the first place. Because they're all interconnected, is what I would say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I just don't think that the satisfaction of divine justice and the propitiation of God's wrath would lead to that. I mean, none of the fathers came to that conclusion.
What is wrath?
The wrath of God is justice in relation. I mean, very simply speaking, it's just going to be justice in relation to sin. And justice and divine justice itself is going to be, well, not only God's inherent righteousness, but also his perfect law upon which the universe is founded upon.
So what is God's perfect? So what is for breaking God's law? What is the punishment for God's law?
The punishment for God's law is going to be eternal death.
it says death. So the punishment for breaking God's law is death, right? Breaking that
Yeah.
covenant. And so the question becomes, are we reconciled to Christ through his death, burial, and resurrection? You would agree, right?
We're reconciled to Christ through his death, for his passion and death, as the Catechism of St. Moscow teaches
there
question
is
208.
no reconciliation if Christ doesn't resurrect. His death doesn't have any merit if he doesn't resurrect. What does it do? What does it accomplish?
It opens up the possibility for the just forgiveness of sin. The St. Peter of Moscow teaches in his Catechism that our church accepts. Question 208. His voluntary passion and death is both a perfect satisfaction of the justice of God, and it obtains an infinite fund of merit, which allows Christ to justly forgive sin. I mean, that's a bit of a paraphrase, but I can pull up the Catechism on my computer now. You can read it.
That doesn't pick out PSA.
Just one.
Yeah, absolutely does pick up PSA, because the way in which that Christ satisfies the justice of God is that he undergoes the just penalty of sin in our place. He satisfies the penalty due to sin.
So God cannot forgive without punishing sin?
Not insofar as God is omnipotent. Obviously, he could forgive sin without obviously the crucifixion, but insofar as it is befitting of God and his majesty and his justice, not.
Well, hold on. No, that doesn't follow,
and it wouldn't
because
be befitting of God to save in any other way than the cross.
There's dozens of examples of God forgiving without a punishment in the same way that Christ is punished.
Well, as Archbishop Theophan Prokopovich explains, and St. Gregory Palamas,
I don't want you just spitting out, well, all these people agree with me. We already covered how that's not going to be sufficient in this specific conversation. No.
I mean, I'm appealing specifically to them, not necessarily to say, oh, they all agree with me.
I want you to...
But specifically to point out that, no, I mean, this logic isn't really going to work, because these guys say that, well, nobody is forgiven except through the power of the cross. So anybody who's forgiven of sin prior to Christ's death, it's the merits of Christ being applied to them. Well, not retroactively, but basically it's the merits of Christ being applied to them in advance.
Okay, so every sin. Jerome, just real quick, and then please add whatever you were going to say. I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting you to speak.
No, I just want to make sure that we're all sort of on the same sort of page here, because there's a little remission of blood stuff going on. But go ahead.
Well, I lost my train of thought. Hold on. My biggest problem with what you've said here is you didn't actually meaningfully respond to the contention that I made. What was the contention?
I did.
The contention was, can God...
The contention you made...
Can God write...
The contention you made was that...
Mm-hmm.
The contention you made was that God forgave prior to the crucifixion. I'm saying that every instance in which God forgave prior to the crucifixion, it was him applying his merits that he already wrought before the foundation of the world onto those people. Because Christ was slain before the foundation of the world. He was slain from eternity, as Revelation 13 verse 8 talks about.
Okay, so if you believe that Christ's death, burial, and resurrection are necessary to merit, and those merits are applied to us both in the past and into the future eternally, right? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that any time in which Christ, any time in which man was reconciled to God prior to the crucifixion, or any time in which sin was forgiven prior to the crucifixion, it was through the power of the cross, as St. Gregory Palamas and Archbishop Theophan teach.
Okay. So to comment on that as well. So I think, Miko, I think a lot of people are getting a bit lost in the sense of when it comes to the necessity for Christ to forgive. I think a lot of people are asking whether or not Christ needed to die in order for God to just forgive people that did a trespass against him. I think what you are saying is obviously he could. It's logically possible for him to do so, but more so that it was fitting that the way in which people access that remission of sin is through the blood of Jesus.
Well, yes, I mean, it was most fitting, and it was in accordance with the law of justice, the principle of justice.
Okay.
St. Gregory Palamas talks about it in some 16.
Is the principle of justice from God Himself or something outside of God that God must
Could you repeat the question,
please? Is God's justice something that He must be bound to? Because Blackernay explicitly condemns exchange-based reconciliation models. Period.
No, it doesn't.
It does.
No, it does not.
You're wrong.
It doesn't. You haven't read the Acts. The Acts
I have.
You haven't read the
Could we pull
Council.
that up then?
No, you haven't.
Could we pull that up so that people don't claim things? Could we pull that up if that's all right?
I don't have it on hand right now.
All right. If someone has
it would be
on hand,
on my work. It'd be on my work laptop, which I don't have right now.
Ah, that's okay. If anyone has it in chat, just pull it up, please, because the sort of exchange-based models thing. That's an interesting question, Nikolai. By the way, like that it sort of is God necessitated by His justice, right? Is that
well?
Because
that would suggest that His justice is something outside of Himself that puts necessity on Him.
Did you say the same thing for other attributes like love or power?
No, because they flow directly from Him. What they're saying is that God must punish sin in order for Him to rightly do those things. Whereas with mercy, He suspends His justice to extend mercy. So their view, Miko's view, would necessarily say that mercy is essentially God doing the opposite of justice. He's actually unjust for giving mercy because He's not fully punishing sin in the way that is necessary.
So I think that this is a very interesting question because just before Miko speaks, right, I think just to clarify my view on the topic as well, it's that when it comes to God's justice or God's mercy, justice is something that flows from God's love. So the Orthodox Church doesn't believe that justice is something in the way that you've described for Miko's position. And I don't think Miko believes that either. I think he would say that, yes, justice is something that flows from God's love because justice is simply the love of God applied onto creatures that have sinned. You know, like when we talk about justice, we just mean righting something that might be incorrect or wrong. And so that's why in the Trinitarian life, we don't typically speak of justice because there's nothing wrong in the Trinity. But it would still be fair to say that the Father is just towards the Son is just towards the Holy Spirit. The Father isn't unjust towards the Son, right? Ever.
Well, they're rightly ordered, right? So justice is just a natural outpouring of them.
Right?
But there's a difference between Western understanding of justice, which is a more forensic, legal, transactionary writing of something, and how the Eastern philosophy understood justice, which is reordering that which has been wronged, right? So in America, we see this we even see this expressed in our legal system, right?
In your legal system,
it's retributive in nature, right? So in order to satisfy something, we have to punish it, right? Like there's no actual healing involved. There's no actually righting the wronged party. That's all.
So again, it's that sort of taking it in isolation that you see that people sort of have issue with, right? It's that taking it in isolation. It's not that it itself is wrong. It's just that they've isolated that idea of justice and so on, right? Miko, would you like to add something?
I would absolutely disagree with this characterization of at least the earlier Western law. It's all based off of Roman law. So concepts such as satisfaction, vicarious satisfaction, all of the stuff is in Roman law, which you can find in Justinian's Digest. I mean, you can even find the concept
the philosophical underpinnings of Justinian versus, for example, English common law. Massively different assumptions on what is being achieved by punishing crime. Whereas with Justinian, it's very different.
Can you demonstrate that rather than asserting it?
Not off the top of my head. I don't have the Codex Justinian just like sitting with me right here, and I don't have all of English common law and the lawyers and the people that produced English common law off the tips of my fingers. You can either accept that that's true, or we could just move on. We don't need to play this like, can you prove that right now? Because we don't have.
Well, I don't.
You don't need to.
Because in English common law and in Anselm, the satisfaction of justice, right, is to restore order. after
No,
disorder, which has been
no.
caused by
It's
sin
it's to
and an
restore
offense.
honor. It's restore honor.
No, it's to restore order,
Mm-mm.
and I could read Anselm right now, Codeus Homo in
His
114. You want me
again,
to?
it's you don't take one section of Anselm. You have to look at his holistic view. He believed that the reason Christ needed to be punished on the cross and the way that we merit his accomplishment on the cross is that the reason it merited so much was because Christ has infinite honor and he was infinitely dishonored by experiencing what he experienced on the cross, and as a result,
why was he dishonored?
Do you understand what it means to be? What do you understand? Do you know what Anselm understands what it means for God to be honored and dishonored? In Codeus Homo. Have you read Anselm?
I've
can
read
literally quote him right now.
I've read some of Anselm, but I'm not interested in you just reading quotes. What I'm saying is that
No. I think
if you
it's
take a
very
whole
important because we have to address the mischaracterization of these authors. So
I don't
I'm
think it's
gonna
a
get Anselm up right
mischaracterization.
now.
These are like I'm not just taking this view out of my butt and said I read this myself. I read it, but I also went to subject matter experts on these things, people that have the degrees in these areas, the people that have studied these atonement theories and these things. Like for example, have you read the dissertation by Father Joseph Lucas on atonement? He has an entire dissertation on atonement, right?
No.
Okay,
I
well,
haven't read
he
Father Joseph
explained.
Lucas. I've read Saint Seraphim Sobolev, and I've read Archbishop Theophan Blistov. That's where I
Okay,
get
but
my
you
theology
are
from.
okay. Do you understand that's again the Confession of Dositheus says don't do that. Go to the living theanthropic body to help you guide you in your interpretation. It doesn't say go read
That's
the church
not what the
fathers.
Confession of
That's
Dositheus
what it
says.
says overtly. We're not going to go there. I'm not going to say every time
No,
I
it's
say
not.
something you just deny it, and it's kind of irritating.
Well,
you can either
Yes,
accept.
because you're just wrong.
Hold on,
And
let's
we
just
can
pause
That's
contest
there.
a
it
great
now.
assertion.
Let's
Great
just pause there.
assertion.
Hold on,
That's
hold on.
really academic of you. But
My
anyways,
apologies. Please, Nicola, just
I
1 second.
really want
Remind
to
the room.
emphasize this real quick, Jerome. Just real quick, and
Look,
then please, I'll let you, please. What I'm bringing up with this is important, is that the living theanthropic body of the church, the clergy, the bishops that are alive today, the synods alive today, are the ones that guide us in the interpretation of these things. Now, does that mean we can't read or can't interpret these things wholesale? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just emphasizing that just Miko saying, well, no, you're wrong, you're interpreting this wrong. Well, why do I trust you, Miko? See, there's no reason for me to trust your interpretation.
You're continuing
Anyways, let's
thing.
continue.
So this is what, okay. So actually reset that. Okay, just as a quid pro quo, because when we have conversations, you need to make sure that the point is substantiated. If you've made a point, please provide any sort of evidence or data that actually supports the thesis. Unless you both agree on the point, right? Don't bring a claim or a point that is ill substantiated or unsubstantiated. So if you say X believes this, please show where X believes this. And if there is a contest, then yes, I will shut it down so that we can move on. Okay. But at least cite the relevant data so everyone can know where we've gotten it from. And that goes for Miko as well as Nikolai.
Well, this isn't, no offense, Jerome, this is not a formal academic debate. No one came prepared. No one came prepared for that. So that you demanding that in the middle of a discussion,
here's my reasons why.
Immediately undercuts the entire discussion.
No, because Nikolai
makes it go nowhere.
My reasons. Okay, so my reasons for saying this very clearly is so that we don't attribute falsity to people where there is none, and so that if someone says, "Oh, you just made a claim with no evidence," that's not true. You did provide evidence. Okay, you have to evidence it. It's not just for like academic conversations. Even a normal person, if you say this happened today, they're gonna be like, "Really? Say swear." They're gonna be like, "Yeah, swear." Can you show me? They're gonna be like, "Okay." It's a normal people convo. Now, I also want to say, in contrast to this, please don't quote bombard. Okay, if you are going to cite sources or cite data or cite information, make sure that you can give the entire source so the person can review whatever data they want to review in their own time, whatever, and so that whatever you quote is actually germane to the point that can actually be discussed. So if I cite a father, make sure that the quote is juicy enough that people can actually pick apart what's going on there. Anyway, so Miko, please just just to make sure
there's
that
two things that, again, even with citations, like Miko can cite things, he can claim to be citing things all day long. At the end of the day, if I don't have the book in hand and I'm reading it with my own two eyes, I just have to take his word for it. So that's what's being asked.
Why they should cite the entire book. They should not just cite the
Well,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Well,
I can send most of the books that I cite, like in English translations, not done by me, just below the chat, like just below the space chat.
No.
Most of my sources are in English.
That's still just pictures of pages or random quotes made in meme format.
No,
That's
I
not.
can send. No. I can send full books for the quotes.
Okay,
for the
but
quotes
again, just a
I'm
picture of a
citing.
book doesn't do anything. I said listen. At the end of the day,
No.
you
I
can
can send
tell me.
PDFs,
You can
and I can
tell me.
send links, and you can read the books, and you
I'm
can read
not
the
going to do
articles
that
and
in the middle
scroll
of a
through them.
discussion, Miko. Are you retarded?
No, you don't
Well,
have to. It's just so that
you don't have
later
to.
on in your own time you can do whatever you want to do, and
And
it's
so
so
can
that
everybody else as they're watching.
right.
it.
Like
Okay,
for
but this
example,
is
the Perry
basically
Robinson stuff, I'm looking
everything
up.
that I've cited so far is completely uncontroversial amongst actual scholars, PhDs in the field.
So I think you've cited one priest.
I could give you at least 4 priests that have dissertations in this area that all agree with my interpretation of it.
Could you give me the dissertations then, and we can read those? I mean,
they're in my email, but I can probably send them at another point. You can also just literally ask them because they're public figures that literally all the time will say, "Yeah, I can send it to you." Right.
So here's what I will say to that then. So if you can do that, that would be great.
Look
and
at
then
how
we
they're
can
all
actually discuss the
laughing
merits of that. Because let's say you
at
have
the
someone that's
idea
like Anselm. This point about
of
Anselm, and I
appealing
want to talk on this
to
quickly. This point about
dissertations.
Anselm,
It's insane.
the reason as to why God's justice is there, whatever, flows from what we owe God. So, like Nikolai, obviously you've read some of Anselm. Miko, you've read all of Anselm. I've read all of Anselm, right? Most people here maybe have or have not read Anselm. Obviously, we all need to agree on the reason as to why, and we should know the reason as to why we are actually in this predicament. And that stems from what we owe God in the first place, right? And what we owe God, according to Anselm, is absolute fealty. That's the point. So we owe God fealty. And what Adam and Eve did in the garden was just break fealty to God. And because Adam and Eve broke fealty to God, which I assume you know, then what happened was God placed them under punishment. It was a thing that they couldn't pay off. Because the thing that they were required to give God was something infinite, which was obedience to God all the time, at all times. But because they broke it once, now it's no longer infinite, it's finite. Christ comes infinitely obeying this. So Anselm's belief is Christ becoming a man specifically saves Jesus because he never disobeys God. And then, unfortunately, he ends up dying. And because he ends up dying, then something unjust happens to Christ. And so now the Father owes Jesus one. And they're like, well, Jesus, what can I do for you? Jesus is like, well, I'm God. There's nothing you can actually give me. I own everything. And so God says, well, what can I give you then? He's like, well, give me all the people I want to save instead. And that's how salvation becomes accessible to everyone.
Yeah, in a crude way, it's a bit crude, but generally that's going to be Anselm's. Just it's what I'm saying is that it's a bit crude, but it's not too far from what Anselm says.
So what does Anselm say about why sin is of infinite offense to God?
Because the action that we owe God is an infinite one. So what we're supposed to do is owe undying fealty to God at all times. Right? The minute you break undying fealty, you are no longer giving something infinite to God because the obedience you can give to God is finite. There's less of it now. Assuming humans live on forever, they're always going to obey God.
So the sin, but again, this is why Anselm's view is wrong because
I agree. His view is
severity of the sin is not determined by the act itself, which is opposition to God. The severity is because of the status of the person who had offended. And therefore, Christ.
Yes, that's true, and that's what
it's not true. That's not the Orthodox view.
That is the Orthodox view. I can read John Chrysostom affirming this in his homily.
It's embarrassing.
In his first homily on.
Dude, go to the divine services. They literally do not teach that.
So, do you?
You want me to read John Chrysostom's first homily?
Because if your view, because again, if your view is accurate, you would see this reflected in the Old Testament. We don't see this reflected in the Old Testament because different sins have different.
Reflected in the Old Testament.
Let me finish. Are you going to let me finish?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me finish. Thank you. So, in the Old Testament, certain sins have different things that need to be offered up for atonement. So they're not all of equal offense because if the severity of the sin is based on the status of the person, then any sin is of infinite offense to God. That means even the lightest of sins require the maximum amount of punishment. So you're wrong because your view does not reflect in the Old Testament, and your view must
It's
reflect.
Penance,
Let me
penance
finish.
isn't
I'm almost done.
penance.
Your view
Penance
must.
in the Old Testament isn't
It's not about
it's not for the
penance.
purpose of the
One
satisfaction
of the
for sin.
offerings for a sin was a grain offering. Not even a blood sacrifice was required for certain types of sins. Why? Because not
Okay,
every
we can
sin
bring
is of
up
equal offense to God. Therefore, the act itself is not
That's
the problem.
absolutely false.
You're just wrong.
Can
You're
we
just
bring up?
Absolutely
Can we
like,
bring
this
up
is
John
just
Chrysostom, please?
basic
Because you
stuff.
mentioned John Chrysostom on this, Miko. Could you bring up John Chrysostom, please? Because you made the claim.
Okay, let me read John Chrysostom's first homily on Philem. The offences against us here are 100 pence, but those from us against God are 10,000 talents. But you know that offences are also judged by the quality of the persons. For instance, he who insulted a private person has done wrong, but not so much as he who has insulted a magistrate. And he who has offended a greater magistrate offends in a higher degree, and he who offends an inferior one in a lower degree. But he who insults the king offends much more. The injury is indeed the same, but it becomes greater by the excellence of the person. And if he who insults a king receives intolerable punishment on account of the superiority of the person, for how many talents will he be answerable who insults God? So that even if we should commit the same offenses against God that we do against man, even so it is not an equal thing. But as great as is the difference between God and man, so great is that between the offenses against him and them.
That doesn't pick out Anselm. That's not Anselm's view.
It absolutely picks up. It absolutely picks
Absolutely
out
is
Anselm
not.
because
Absolutely,
I just
you
want to
said
make sure that we're on the same page here. So
you said that the
remember,
magnitude
one second,
you said that the
Miko.
magnitude of sin wasn't according to the status of the
No,
person
no, no,
being
no, no,
offended.
no, no.
John
That's
Chrysostom's explicitly teaching that.
no. You're wrong.
Explicitly
That's
teaches that.
not what was the point I made. Restate
the
it.
point you made, Nikolai, was
No, I want
that
Miko to do it, not
Anselm.
you, Jerome. I want Miko to do it because Miko is not addressing the actual argument.
One of the things that you pointed out as a distinctive of Anselm's teaching that isn't taught by the church and you can't find in the liturgy is that the magnitude of sin is dependent on the status of the person offended. You explicitly denied that, and you said that John Chrysostom didn't teach it. I just showed
That's
you.
not.
Just showed him teaching it.
You read that, but it doesn't pick out the same thing that Anselm is pointing out. That's the point. Anselm's view is not St. John Chrysostom's view. Period.
But we're talking about this one thing you said. So you said Anselm believes this thing. No one in the church believes that. Mirko said, "Here's someone in the church that believes that." You said,
no,
but
because
John
I'm saying
Chrysostom
I'm
isn't
rejecting
Anselm.
that somebody in the church does believe that. I'm saying that he's misapplying it and misinterpreting it, both on Anselm's side and St. John Chrysostom's side.
So what do you think John Chrysostom means where he says, as great as the differences between God and men, so great is that between the offenses
first off,
God and men?
St. John Chrysostom is preaching in a homily. He's emphasizing the severity of what sin is to somebody else. But what I was talking about is that the infinite offense of God is different in Anselm's view because what it's accomplishing is different. That was what I was emphasizing.
What is accomplishing?
What is
accomplishing?
What is it accomplishing?
When we infinitely offend God, what is it doing?
What?
It condemns us to eternal hell without the merits of Christ.
It doesn't. No, it separates.
Yes, it does.
All right.
Sorry,
are you gonna?
It separates us from God and without the merits of Christ.
Listen, Miko, if you're
that
not
separation is perpetual.
Okay. So you're starting to irritate me. You're gonna let me finish?
Okay.
Because now I derailed my thought,
and
now my thought process is completely gone. You asked me to explain the view again, so I could explain the distinction. Now I can't remember what I was going to say. So we can move on.
Okay, so at least we've agreed, right, that the difference is not the fact that they don't believe that, but the way they apply it. So John Chrysostom does believe that, and the church generally believes that when we do offend God, it's sort of an infinite magnitude because of the dignity of the guy that you're, offending. But that's not anthropomorphic.
Yeah,
it's
no,
just
that doesn't work.
Infinite.
That doesn't necessarily work from Anselm's view either, though.
Anselm has a different application. Remember that the reason why Anselm believes it's a sin, Nikolai, and that it deserves infinite punishment is because the action itself is an infinite one. So it's not the dignity of the person that you're offending just as, it's the action as well. John Chrysostom believes that it's also the dignity. And that's what he's talking about with God's offenses. And he also says, I find that the offenses exceed, but not only in that they become great by the eminence of the person, but by their very nature. So that's where you were talking about major and minor sins, and some sins require
Well, because
harsher blood
John
sacrifices and stuff.
19:11, right? We can pull that up. John 19:11 makes
And
distinctions about
Hebrews 9.
sins. Yeah. So there's
we believe in major and minor sins, but also we also believe in the Bible verse where it says, "Without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sins."
Again, that is not an exhaustive view, because again, in the Old Testament, God forgives people. God forgives people in the Old Testament for what? By offering a grain offering.
So forgiveness.
There was no blood sacrifice for that.
Okay, so forgiving and remitting aren't exactly the same thing. So we know that, by the way. Like, we know that. Even in the baptismal service, we talk about their forgiveness and their remission, right? So God forgiving you is that God doesn't hold this against your charge. That's the legal aspect. That's not the same as actually God removing the blot or stain of sin, which is what remission is. We need both. So in the Old Testament, they could receive forgiveness by grain offerings, sin offerings, all these kinds of things. But it didn't remove the blot. That's why we're not under the Old Covenant. The only thing that removes the blot is the paschal mystery of Christ in death.
Exactly.
Right? Now, I wasn't supposed to speak. It's just that people keep getting annoyed. Let's continue, please.
So, Miko, your position, because you're interpreting it wrongly, I would say, and I think you're interpreting the Church Fathers wrongly, honestly comes down to just a financial understanding of atonement.
It's not a financial understanding of atonement.
It's a loophole.
I never said that, and I never precluded an ontological effect or any damage that sin causes to the person when they commit it.
So no, well, here
sin is both a legal problem and an ontological problem.
You said Father is playing God the Father is playing essentially a legal game with himself.
It's not a legal game.
He's demanding an infinite payment, then he's paying it himself through his Son so that he can forgive people. So you're necessitating that God cannot forgive people unless he does this infinite payment model. Infinite merit model.
You can answer this very simply.
But that's simply, again, as I've already explained, sin is forgiven through the cross. And it can only be forgiven through the cross insofar as it is most fitting for God to do, and insofar as it's not repugnant to his divine attributes. I'm not denying that God isn't omnipotent, right? I never denied God's omnipotence in this discussion.
So I think because I mentioned in Hebrews 9:23, right? We can actually look at what he says, that the remission of blood. John Chrysostom, obviously, he sort of speaks on it, and the church sort of takes his opinion on that as well, right? We can sort of look at what John Chrysostom, believes there, without the shedding of blood, that there's no remission of sins, right? He says specifically, why almost, and why did he qualify it? Because those ordinances were not a perfect purification, nor a perfect remission, but half complete and in a very small degree. And in this case, he says, this is the blood of the New Testament, which is shed for you for the forgiveness of sins. So John Chrysostom explains that actually, Nikolai, you are correct, that the blood didn't actually forgive the sins because there wasn't enough blood in that way. Like the quality of what's going on there isn't an infinite one. But the blood of the Son of God, who is God, the blood of God will be able to cover all of that. In that it can actually purify completely and wholly that which the blood touches. When we touch it, in the Eucharist, we say, "This has touched my lips, and now it's taken away my sins."
So, again, we're not going to get bogged down in the minutia of that direction. What I was trying to emphasize was that
I'll put the source here for people to access if they need it.
So, Miko, who held us captive in terms of our bondage to the law?
Who held us captive? I mean,
to whom was the blood of Christ offered?
It was offered to the Father, as Saint Gregory the Theologian says, but he accepts it not because he had any need of it, insofar as he didn't need, he wasn't itching to punish Christ, but insofar as he wished to save humanity. he accepted Christ.
Yeah, let's agree that the
Christ in his
father
own
doesn't
right.
need like a blood debt from his son. Okay, it's just that it was a fitting thing that the father, and it's a Trinitarian action, obviously accepts. It's not
The
that the
person
father
who held
wants
us
something so this.
bondage to death was not the father.
Well, I
No,
never said that.
your
You asked
question
me. You
was
asked me
a
to who
different
the
one.
blood was offered to, and I answered
Yeah.
with the Father. I answered the
Yeah,
Father.
the payment. The payment for
The
Christ's
payment is
death.
the blood.
Yes. So
But
does
the
it go?
payment is the
Does it go
blood.
to the if God is not the one that's holding us bondage to death? To whom is the sacrifice going towards? Right? It's an offering to God, we would say, right? But
Yes.
the question is, whom is holding us captive? It's death. Who holds the keys to death? The devil. So
Well,
from
technically,
that
Christ
view, you
holds
would
the keys.
have to say that the you'd have to hold your view would necessitate that it's the devil we're paying to.
No,
So
not at all.
we need
The
to
same
ask this
Theophan the
question.
Recluse says in his commentary on Ephesians 1:7. It's paid to the divine law. It's paid to the justice of God.
Could I ask a question as well,
You're
please?
dividing the justice of God from the love of God and the mercy of God. So again, if God needs infinite, if God has an infinite debt, if we have obscured it, if we have attained an infinite debt against God, God can't rightly give us mercy without him being unjust.
Wait,
What do you
sorry,
mean?
I'm trying to track.
Rightly give us mercy. He rightly gives mercy through the sacrifice of Christ. That's what Catechism teaches.
So you're saying God? You're just going back in circles. This is absurd.
Christ, voluntary
You're going back in
passion
circles. You said you don't hold to this earlier, and now you're saying that you hold to it, and it says, "Oh, now we have to do." This is vicious circles, Miko.
Wait, what are you saying that
Christ,
he said that he
voluntary
didn't hold
passion
to
and
before?
death.
Because
Christ's voluntary passion and death, right? Sorry to cut you off, Sid.
It's all right.
Christ's voluntary passion and death is the way in which God forgives sin without prejudice to justice. Question 208. Catechism of St. Philip of Moscow. It's accepted by our church, Nikolai.
Would you agree with what
you going
said there?
No, I don't accept Miko just reading things. Sorry.
Okay, please cite the catechism.
No, I don't. I just explained to you guys earlier. I'm not interested in playing.
So if we just want to do concept work, okay, maybe it's just concept work that we want to do, right? Is that fine? Maybe just concept work. No fathers of the church.
Well, it's not about having no fathers of the church. It's okay to say, well, generally speaking, this is what the church fathers say, and then saying, well, here's where I'm getting that from. The problem is what Miko is doing is he's trying to guise his views in what he says the church fathers are saying, which again requires interpretation, which I don't accept either yours, Jerome, or Miko's ability to interpret these
I haven't guised my view in it. I've shown the deference of the church on these matters as well. But
no, what you're claiming. Well, this is what the deference of the church is. You're just claiming that. Well, yes, of course, but I actually have theanthropic institution and people that are a living body of. Hold on.
Institution.
Yes, but who do you appeal to? Who are the living scholars and the living body of the church that are actually holding to your view?
The living body of the church that are beholden to my view are the recent catechisms that the church has made.
Okay, so again, PSA, limited atonement,
would that be the
inherited
I
guilt
don't need to argue
are
for
overtly condemned in recent catechisms. Both in the OCA, OCA and Antioch, and I've been privy to the Antioch.
I want to be clear. When did I ever?
Well, I'm not under Antioch or
Wait, hold on. Just want to be clear. You said that I believe in limited atonement. When have I ever said
I didn't say you believed in limited atonement. I said that the Catechism recently condemns these things. Miko holds to these things. You may not, Jerome, but Miko does.
Miko holds to limited
atonement.
When have I
ever said that?
Because if you hold the PSA, you either have to hold the limited atonement or just accept a contradiction in your view.
That.
I did earlier.
Okay, then. Well, maybe I have a contradictory view, but I definitely do not believe in limited atonement. Right?
You need to demonstrate.
I've never said I believed in limited atonement.
Yeah, could you demonstrate that you need to believe in limited atonement in order to believe in PSA? You also didn't critique the spectrum model that I gave, which is the actual academic view, and also is
no,
the
it's
view
not.
that most
But
of the academics
again,
that
I did
critique
it.
I've cited the academics. And I actually put them in source, and you don't have to interpret that. You can just read it yourself and come away with the view.
You can read it yourself. Gosh, you're so dishonest. I did respond to the view I did. I said that
And your response
that
was, I
doesn't pick.
disagree.
I said it doesn't pick out PSA as understood by the. Again, explained. It reduces the definition to purely its words. That's all it does. And all you did was cite a single. How?
Because maybe that is the definition.
Because it's not the definition.
That's what the Moscow Patriarchate.
We can see where PSA is defined. And all. By the way, the Moscow Patriarchate does not teach it.
You defined it by
the
RC
Moscow Patriarchate
and
does
the whole
teach a
point...
form of PSA. That's false.
No, it doesn't.
It teaches a form of it.
No,
yes,
it does not.
Okay, can you bring up the Moscow Catechism, please?
No, my bishop catechized me for 3 years. He's under the Moscow Patriarchate. So you either my bishop isn't told him. Shut up. Do either of you have any ability?
Sorry.
Please, Nikolai, please.
No, not gonna do it anymore. Neither of them letting me speak. Neither of them letting me get a word in edgewise. They just make their claims over and over and over again and make assertions and say, but Saint Theophan the Recluse says this. The Catechism of Saint Philaret says this. Again, even if you were to show me this, like, I'm just done. I'm not going to do it. I don't have the patience for these kind of guys. Very dishonest behavior. When I ask basic questions, they just say, no, that's not the view. What are you talking about? This is basic stuff. This is basic stuff. So boring. These guys are just intellectual. And also, just Jerome having to interject every 5 seconds, not letting me actually hold Miko to the fire. I couldn't actually hold him to the fire. Jerome has to save his ass every single time. This is just completely dishonest. I have no interest in engaging with that kind of behavior. Try to get this in. So, right here. Part of what PSA means is that Jesus is classed a sinner so that the Father can exhaust his wrath on Jesus. PSA was a change to satisfaction models of the scholastics to make it compatible with sola fide. Sola fide requires forensic imputation. Notice how they never... Well, yeah, of course he was just trying to quote mine. All he didn't make an argument himself. He just said, well, no, this is what St. Philaret says. Well, you're not. You're just saying that's what it says. It's Control F theology. Sola fide requires forensic imputation of guilt and demerit to Christ, and the forensic imputation of righteousness to the sinner to achieve a taxonomic change. PSA is part of the mechanism by which this takes place in the Protestant schema. Language of appeasing divine wrath does not, of itself, pick out PSA. Why? Because there are many ways to appease. Offering something else other than what the law requires can also achieve appeasement, say as in Aquinas or Anselm models. Second, exhausting wrath may not qualify as appeasement either. If the wrath is spent, it is not appeased or assuaged, but spent. Mere language of appeasement may not be compatible with PSA, strictly speaking. No, it doesn't teach any definition of PSA. I've gone to my bishop and asked him, does the Moscow Patriarchate teach PSA? He said no. Now, who knows better? My bishop, who is under the Moscow Patriarchate, or Miko? Now, Miko will say, oh, they agree with me. Okay, who's your priest and who's your bishop, Miko? So we can reach out to them and ask them. Oh, it's over, guys. So I'll create a space real quick. If any of you want to call in, you can. No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't. And again, how many times did I try to get a word in edgewise and I was immediately interrupted before I could make any argument? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely deplorable behavior, really. Let me share the window. I don't have any interest in discussing this with those guys anymore. So, copy link. Again, when I asked a basic question, no answer. The necessity of PSA to avoid the logical conclusion of universalism. The reform system must limit the scope of the atonement. Christ did not die for all of humanity. He died only for the elect. Those are specifically chosen by God before the foundation of the world. If Christ died for every single human being who ever lived, unlimited atonement, and if his death actually paid for the penalty of their sins, which PSA requires, then every single human being would be saved. Because a just God cannot punish sin twice. If Christ paid the sins of Adolf Hitler and Judas, then their sins are paid for, and God's justice is satisfied. They would have to go to heaven. So in order to get around this, what do they add to PSA models? They add limited atonement. To avoid the logical conclusion of universalism, the reform system must limit the scope of atonement. Christ did not die for all humanity. He died for the elect, right? So that is the view, guys. That is the problem. What these guys want to do is they want to reduce everything to specific systems. Notice how they dodged right past, guys. Notice how they dodged that. They went right past the fact that I answered to sola fide, and Jerome agreed that sola fide was necessary. If sola fide is necessary, then forensic imputation is necessary. To preserve sola fide, forensic imputation must be purely external, legal, one-time declarative act that happens instantaneously the moment the person believes, because the righteousness is not infused into the person, which would take a lifetime of growth. It is merely imputed. This allows reformers to say, at the same time, righteous and sinner. So the reformers are allowed to say, we're both righteous and sinner. You are inwardly still a wretched sinner, but because Christ's righteousness is imputed to you externally, God legally declares you just. Faith alone works because faith is merely the passive hand that reaches out and grabs this external legal declaration. Does that make sense, guys? Am I crazy? So that is the answer to the question. And I'm not interested in being interrupted every 5 seconds from these jokers, from these goobers. If they're going to interrupt me constantly and not let me speak, I'm done. I'm not going to do it anymore. So we're gonna get into this, guys, here in a second. But yeah, I mean, this is this was a complete crapshoot. Complete crapshoot. Oh my gosh. Okay. So Peter says here, John 11:25-26, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, shall not, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Yeah, sure. But what does it mean to believe? What does it mean to live in Christ? So, like, what does that mean? So, it's funny. I don't think it's going to start. He tried doing it earlier and it didn't do anything. But guys, sincerely, even Grok knows. Yeah. And notice again, if we go back into the conversation later, if you guys rewatch this, notice how Jerome has to come in and save his buddy Miko like 5 different times throughout that entire conversation. He does not let Miko and me actually go into it and allow me to actually critique Miko's view. He always does this. Yeah, we'll just say that. Yeah, I'm not gonna respond. Jerome, to be fair, doesn't know when to shut up. You know he doesn't. He also had a habit of just kind of speaking down to me as if he knows more. Oh, I'm an academic. Oh, I know more than Perry Robinson. Oh, I know more than Father Stephen Dion. I know more than Father Joseph Lucas, both who have PhD dissertations in atonement. I cannot wait for Father Stephen DeYoung's book to come out so that we can finally put this stupid debate to rest. Let's go and see what Perry Robinson is saying here. Here you can see the typical Reformed polemic of for iconoclasm. Yeah. He knows more than anyone, yeah. It's unfortunate. I just don't have any interest in sitting there and being talked down to for the whole time when I'm trying to make specific arguments and they just don't accept it. And just saying, nope, you're wrong. It's like, okay, can you demonstrate how I'm wrong? Well, the Catechism of St. Philaret says this. Well, I don't trust your interpretation of St. Philaret. Like, why should I trust it? Oh, it's just a plain interpretation. There's no such thing as a plain interpretation. And then we were just going to get into a battle about interpretation. It's just endless stuff, guys. It never goes well with these kinds of chaps. Anyways, guys, I just wanted to record this for posterity's sake so that people could actually listen to the full conversation, unedited. It wasn't really fruitful. At the end of the day, Jerome will defend Miko no matter what. He will jump in and try and interject when he feels like Miko is on the back foot. And that's what we just learned today. Miko can't actually defend his own view. He can only just regurgitate Control F theology. I guarantee you he's at his computer just pressing Control F. He probably has a very long document. He just Controls F and says, he mentioned atonement. Control F. Here's a list of saints that say the thing that I'm saying. So, once again, guys, these guys don't know what they're talking about. This is why academia can harm you severely. And they hide their views well. Notice it takes a while to pick it out, but eventually they always go mask off. So, with that being said, God bless you guys. Have a nice day. Tomorrow, I don't know what time, but tomorrow we'll be doing a Warhammer stream, assuming that nothing comes up for me. So, with that said, have a wonderful day. God bless, and thank you for all the generous support over time.